Chapter 703. Yin Yang did not evade. With a loud cry, he slashed his saber at the heaven's gate again. There was nothing fancy about it. It was a simple straight slash. Then, with a loud clang, Ouyang Shaoxi tumbled into the sea of fire once more. Ouyang Shaoxi's actual cultivation base was far above Yun Yang's, having reached the intermediate level of the Tao realm. However, due to the continuous exhaustion and the fact that he had stayed in the fire for nearly 6 hours, he was already at the end of his rope. As the saying went, an arrow at the end of its flight cannot wear a pickaxe. Facing Yun Yang, who had Emmy's cheats and the endless divine art to support him, how could Ouyang Shaoxi still be Yun Yang's opponent? Not to mention the fact that there were hundreds of burns all over his body. Bright blisters covered his entire body. At first glance, he looked like a bunch of grapes in the shape of a human. The recoil from Yun Yang's 2 saber strikes had caused a dozen blisters to burst on his body. The blisters were dripping and his flesh and skin were dangling from his body. The pain was excruciating, piercing deep into his lungs and bone marrow. Now that he was sent flying by Yun Yang's saber again, he almost fell into the pile of charcoal again. With a shudder, he became much more clear-headed and sprung up once more, charging forward with all his might. He was well aware that his previous judgment was greatly biased. He did not know how Supreme Cloud had done it, but the various anomalies he had conjured earlier did not consume too much of Supreme Cloud's energy. At the very least, he was no match for Fengjing now. Moreover, Supreme Cloud had repelled him time and time again, but he did not kill him, he was still toying with him. He had to find a way to leave this area. Otherwise, he would inevitably fall into the burning charcoal again and again under the other party's continuous attacks. If that was the case, he would only be burned alive. With this in mind, he dashed out like a mad tiger, madly urging his remaining energy and life force to break out of the encirclement. Although Ouyang Shaoxi was as ferocious as a frenzied tiger and was willing to risk his life, his injuries were too severe after all, and his actual combat power was extremely limited. Yin Yang could totally stop him and force him back into the pile of charcoal just like before. Unexpectedly, Yin Yang did not try to stop him. Instead, he retreated several thousand feet away from the boundary of the fire. Although the atmosphere here was still abnormally hot, it was already bearable and wouldn't burn to death. Ouyang Shaoxi had fallen into a state of bewilderment after he had forcefully mustered his remaining strength to rush out of the fire. He had initially thought that his opponent's strategy was clear and was determined to fight him to the bitter end. No matter what, they would not allow him to rush out and leave the fire. However, he didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to give in. While he was puzzled, he felt even more exhausted. That attack just now was supported by what little yuan qi he had left. Without the powerful interception that he had expected, the breath that he had forcefully gathered dissipated on its own. He felt that he could not even stand steadily. His eyes were filled with stars, and he was so tired that he wanted to die. "Are you tired? Do you want some water?" Yin Yang asked from the other side. You'll give me water?" Ouyang Shaoxi could not help but lick his lips. "Would you be so kind?" He was already exhausted, but when he heard the word water, he immediately felt as if his internal organs were on fire. Yin Yang nodded. "I've always been kind. If you want water, I'll give you water." Before his words could echo in the air, a loud rumble rang out. The sky suddenly turned upside down, and a bright white waterfall fell from the sky, pouring down in torrents. Ouyang Shaoxi was inexplicably ecstatic. He opened his mouth almost instinctively and continued to drink without a care. At this moment, even if the water was poisoned, he would accept it. Yin Yang looked on coldly from the sidelines, allowing Ouyang Shaoxi to drink to his heart's content. A smile appeared on his blistered face. Supreme Cloud is indeed a gentleman. For this water, even if you and I are enemies of life and death, I, Ouyang Shaoxi, will still appreciate your kindness. Yin Yang said with a fake smile. "Appreciate? There's no need. Besides, I'm not a gentleman, as long as you can accept my kindness." Ouyang Xiaoxi was speechless. He immediately felt that something was wrong, but he could not figure out what was wrong. Right now, he really needed the nourishment of water too much. Once he gulped down the water, not only did the restlessness in his body dissipate, even his basic qi had recovered by half. His current condition was much better than it had been earlier. However, he immediately sensed that something was amiss. He was still wondering why Yin Yang would be so kind as to give him water to drink and even let him rest when he was on the opposite side of the conflict. Yin Yang was too kind, too soft-hearted. However, as a strange feeling rose within him, Ouyang Xiaoxi suddenly felt that something was not right. It was a kind of itch that started very slight, but gradually intensified, gradually growing. Gradually, it grew to an unbearable level. Itch, an unbearable itch. That feeling was simply too exhilarating. Supreme Cloud. Ouyang Xiaoxi howled, "You're despicable." Yin Yang lifted his head, a ruthless smile on his face. "With this great sir, who has inflicted immortal's odium on an old friend of decades, who dares to call me despicable?" Ouyang Xiaoxi screamed continuously, his voice no longer resembling that of a human. His state of mind should not have been so unbearable. Not only was his cultivation base profound, but his physical body had also gone through the baptism of countless years of refinement. Even if it was not indestructible, it was hard to shake. Under normal circumstances, the medicine that Yun Yang had used on him could be said to be inconsequential. He only needed to circulate his cultivation and it would all be gone. However, it was different now. Not only was Ouyang Xiaoxi's body covered in blisters, his skin was torn and his flesh was unusually tender. In addition, there was also a small part of his body that was damaged internally and filled with pus. The water that had been contaminated with a large amount of itch medicine had really amplified the effect by more than 100 times. Moreover, he had drunk a bellyful of it. At this moment it was a pincer attack from the inside out, making it even more unbearable. It was as if the itch had spread from the marrow to the outside. Supreme Cloud. Supreme Cloud. Ouyang Xiaoxi screamed, "You're so vicious. So vicious." He spread his arms wide. The itch was unbearable, but he dared not scratch it. His body was covered in blisters, and a slight scratch would cause at least a dozen of them to burst. When the pus flowed out, it would only be more unbearable. However, if he did not scratch, he would not be able to withstand it. He had personally experienced the true meaning of 100 claws scratching one's heart today. This excruciating sensation made Ouyang Xiaoxi thoroughly understand what it meant to be better off dead than alive. Saber light flashed as he sprinted straight towards Yun Yang. The muscles on his face were contorted, and his gaze was frenzied. This was no longer a fight for his life, but a suicidal attack. Clang! Clang, 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 Yun Yang's dozen consecutive slashes landed on Ouyang Xiaoxi's saber. Each slash was filled with a forceful, continuous force, causing Ouyang Xiaoxi's body to sway continuously as he retreated. With the continuous impact of the force, the blisters on his body ruptured one after another, causing pus to splatter everywhere. After more than a dozen slashes, Ouyang Xiaoxi's body was so broken that he no longer looked human. Most of the blisters on his body had ruptured. The itch was even more unbearable. Arg! Ouyang Xiaoxi finally could not stand it anymore. He threw away the two sabers that had turned into saw teeth and scratched his body with all his might. Chapter 704. With a single scratch, a large piece of flesh was torn off. His current physical body could only be described as fragile, it could not even be considered weak. Ouyang Xiaoxi screamed and scratched desperately. The flesh on his body had already been completely scratched off, but he still felt only an itch and no pain. Finally, he could not stand it any longer. Ouyang Xiaoxi dashed a dozen meters away and rolled on the ground, desperately rubbing the rough surface against his skin. Everywhere it passed, there was blood mixed with flesh and skin. He screamed, moaned, and cursed, rolling around hysterically. "Give me a quick death. Give me a quick death. Ouyang Xiaoxi screamed and begged desperately. Poof! Yin Yang stepped on Ouyang Xiaoxi's neck with one foot and forced him to face the sky. Yin Yang's cold gaze stared into Ouyang Xiaoxi's already befuddled eyes and said coldly, "Answer a few of my questions and I'll consider giving you a quick death." Ouyang Xiaoxi could no longer hear what he was saying. The only thing he could feel was an unbearable itch. His neck was stepped on, making it difficult for him to move, but his entire body was still struggling and rubbing. At this moment, Ouyang Xiaoxi's physical condition could be said to be miserable. There was no skin or flesh left in his lower abdomen, and even his intestines had been dragged out with a clatter. Yet, they were still convulsing and struggling for their lives. Under normal circumstances, even a high-level cultivator would not be far from death in such a situation. However, this normal situation did not apply to Yin Yang. Yin Yang raised his hand, and a cooling force mixed with the air of vitality enveloped Ouyang Xiaoxi. Ouyang Xiaoxi was startled to find that the itch had completely disappeared, and his consciousness returned. Focusing his gaze, he noticed that in front of him, a cloud of mist seemed to be rippling and slowly coalescing into a human figure. Two cold, electrifying gazes focused on his face without the slightest hint of emotion. Supreme Cloud. Ouyang Xiaoxi murmured, "Give me a quick death. I may have harmed your father, but we have been brothers for 70 years after all. Even if I have not treated him well, after this torture and this life as repayment, it should be enough, right?" His gaze was lost, as if he had seen something. Suddenly, he screamed shrilly, "Dugu! Brother, I've let you down. I'm sorry." Yin Yang's heart skipped a beat. Another wave of cooling energy was sent out as he gritted his teeth and said, "That's right. You and old Dugu are brothers. That's why he went to the Empire of Zio and didn't look for anyone else but you. He trusted you, he treated you as a brother, but you sent him to hell." Ouyang Xiaoxi's consciousness became clearer and clearer. However, after the itch, an overwhelming and boundless pain assaulted him. He panted heavily for a long time before he finally let out a bitter laugh and said, "Yes, I am despicable. I deserve it. Just kill me. I'll go to the underworld to personally apologize to him and make amends." Yin Yang replied coldly, "Apologize? Apologize? Why do you think I'm still keeping you alive until now? I just want to ask you something on behalf of old Dugu." He looked into Ouyang Xiaoxi's eyes and asked, "Why do you want to harm me? We've been brothers for so many years, why do you want to harm me? Old Dugu didn't have the chance to ask you personally. This was also his last regret. I'm sure the old man is still puzzled until now. So, I'm asking you on his behalf." Yin Yang's gaze was like a bolt of lightning as he stared at Ouyang Xiaoxi. "Ouyang Xiaoxi, tell me, why?" Ouyang Xiaoxi was in a daze. His gaze seemed to be unfocused as he stared at the night sky. After a long, long time, he suddenly let out a bitter laugh. Tears streamed down his cheeks along with this bitter laugh. He lay on the ground and did not speak for a long time. Finally, he let out a long sigh. "Back then, we roamed the martial world on our own. We weren't actually close friends, but because our names were similar and we both had the same surname, even our names were similar, we were always mentioned in the same breath by some meddlesome martial artists. One was Xiao Sei, the other was Gu Du. It was truly a solemn sight. Gradually, some people began to put both of us in the same breath. When one was mentioned, the other would definitely be mentioned. However, at that time, we didn't know each other. At most, we knew of each other's existence, that's all. Back then, it was me who found a way to find him. We sparred for a bit and realized that we were really equally matched, so it wasn't considered a disgrace to myself. Since then, we became friends and even fell in love with each other after interacting with each other. In the end, the rumors in the martial world became a reality. He was older than me by 3 years. I respected him as my elder brother. Later on, both of us worked together to do many things, but because of this, we also made many enemies. When we returned from our last work, we found that our families had all been murdered. Not a single one of them was spared. Ouyang Shaoxi sighed. Naturally, both of us were enraged and filled with hatred. We tried everything we could to find our enemies and used all kinds of methods and ways to kill them all, but after our revenge, I was left with nothing but silence. Dugudu was even more disheartened. Finally, one day, he left without saying goodbye. I don't know where he went. Once he left, we didn't see each other for a whole 37 years. Until the year before last, he suddenly came to Zilong City and found me. He said to me, "Avenge me." As Ouyang Shaoxi spoke up to this point, Yunyang felt a sudden jolt in his heart. A sour feeling welled up within him. Ouyang Shaoxi continued, I asked him then, "What's wrong?" He told me that my son had been set up by someone. I smiled and said, "There's nothing to say. Your son is my son, of course, I'll help you." Then, he began to make his move in the empire of Zio. As the local tyrant, I covered for him. With the combined might of both of us, no one in the empire of Zio could stand up to us. We could kill anyone we wanted, including the nobles, generals, and ministers, even the emperor of Zio, who could stop the two of us from joining forces. That so-called great perfection grandmaster can't even withstand a move and a half under our hands. Every time we returned after killing someone, Dugu would look for me for a drink. Each time, he'd pour 8 goblets of wine on the ground and say, "Son, your father has avenged you." Listening up to this point, Yunyang felt a stinging sensation in his nose, almost tearing up. Remember that time, I teased him and asked him, "Where did you get so many sons?" He said, "These are all my sons. They were all good children, but it's a pity that they've been set up." Until the very end, after a murder, he really drank too much that day. He pulled my hand and told me that he'd forgotten something important. I asked him, what did he forget? He said that he had a treasure map, but he'd forgotten to leave it for his youngest son. Yunyang opened his mouth in an unusually forgetful manner, exhaling and inhaling as he chanted in his heart, "Old Dugu. Father. You." Chapter 705. Then I asked, "What kind of treasure map is worth you making such a fuss about? We are already characters who have reached the pinnacle of this world. What treasure is worth your longing for? Old Dugu, you've really changed a lot after all these years." I still remember how disdainful my tone was then. He looked at me sideways and suddenly laughed, saying, "What do you know? If there are immortals in this world, then my youngest son must be one. No one in this world will be able to surpass his achievements sooner or later. He will be unparalleled, and his might will dominate the world." He also said that if I gave him my treasure map and he found this place, he would be a true immortal. Then, I asked, could it be the treasure map of the 17th Master of the Abyss inheritance? He laughed, but didn't say anything else. That night, he went to sleep. He went to sleep, but I tossed and turned the whole night. What kind of map could it be that Duguji valued so much? What really intrigued me was the fact that I too had a treasure map in my hands. If old Dugu also had such a treasure map, wouldn't my chances of finding the treasure increase after combining them? Was this an opportunity bestowed upon me by the heavens? For the next 10 days, I was tormented between taking action and not taking action. On one hand, it was my brother of decades, on the other hand, it was the ultimate temptation of being invincible and becoming an immortal. Finally, the day came. Before that day, I was still hesitating, but Dugu said that the empire of Zio's designated targets were more or less wiped out. After killing Zio's military marshal tomorrow as the final blow, he would go to other countries to seek revenge. I said that I would go with him and help him, but he refused. Ouyang Shaoxi smiled miserably and said, "He rejected me very straightforwardly." I subconsciously thought that he was suspicious of me, because during those few days, I had tried to indirectly inquire about the treasure map a few times. Perhaps after this farewell, apart from losing the chance to obtain the treasure map, I would also no longer have any contact with my old friend. So, in for a penny, in for a pound. when he was about to go out and kill someone the next evening. I dropped a pack of Immortal's odium on him. He didn't suspect me, or perhaps I should say that he never suspected me. After the meal, he said goodbye to me and left by himself. That was the only time he didn't join forces with me to attack. Then, something happened during that assassination attempt. That treasure map was taken away by me when he was captured. We only met face to face, but in that instant, he didn't say a word. He just stared straight at me, straight at me. Ouyang Xiaoxi suddenly choked with sobs. He just looked straight at me. There was no disbelief, no shock, no surprise, no emotion at all, not even anger. He just stared straight at me. He didn't resist until he was taken away. He just stared in the direction I left. Yin Yang felt his heart twitch violently, and for a moment, his entire body began to tremble. I took the treasure map back as I wished, and spent a few days in a daze in the house that the two of us had stayed in for a long time. I didn't know what I was doing, nor did I know what I was thinking. I didn't feel the joy of obtaining the treasure that I had yearned for even in my dreams. I suddenly realized that he had never doubted me from the beginning, but Ouyang Xiaoxi suddenly cried out loud, "Brother! Dugu! I've let you down! I've let you down! I've let you down!" As he screamed, tears streamed down his cheeks, choking him with sobs. My obsession, for the sake of a map, has caused the death of my only brother in this life. Ouyang Xiaoxi laughed bitterly. Until today, Supreme Cloud, do you know that I'm now living a life worse than death because of you? But I don't hate you. I really don't hate you. I'm an unjust person who betrayed his brother. He stared into the void and froze for a long time. Suddenly, he burst into laughter. With a shake of his hand, the contents of the spatial ring in his hand poured out. From within, he took out a parcel. The items inside were 2 pieces of torn fur. These are the 2 maps that I have. The triangular one is mine, the one that looks like a square is Dugu's. Take it all. Ouyang Xiaoxi laughed bitterly. Just take it that I'm returning it to his son, all right? Yin Yang looked at the 2 pieces of the treasure map, his gaze as cold as ever. He had no intention of picking them up. Ouyang Xiaoxi's gaze had already begun to slacken. He panted heavily, inhaling deeply. Suddenly, he roared hysterically, "Supreme Cloud! Take out your saber!" Yin Yang turned to look at him. Ouyang Xiaoxi cried out tragically, "Take out your saber! Take out your saber! Take out your saber!" Yin Yang gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. With a twist of his wrist, the divine edge suddenly appeared in his hand. It gleamed coldly as he murmured, "If so, I'll fulfill your wish." Ouyang Xiaoxi roared into the sky, "Dugu, do you see this? Your son has avenged you. Ha 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 ha." Amidst his maniacal laughter, he mustered the last of his remaining strength and abruptly tilted his body, slamming his neck against the edge of the saber. With a plop, a bony head flew into the air. In the air, the laughter still reverberated freely, filled with a sense of relief. Ouyang Xiaoxi's decapitated body slowly slumped to the ground. Phew. Yin Yang exhaled a long breath and murmured, "Father, I've helped you ask. I wonder if you're satisfied with this result?" No matter what, Ouyang Xiaoxi has already gone down. If you're not satisfied, you can settle the score with him. I didn't destroy his soul and consign him to eternal damnation. I left his consciousness and soul to find you. I don't know if you saw it, if you heard it, but I still feel that there's a chance for you to meet again, for you to come and erase this regret. In my opinion, he has already paid the price for his mistake in his own way. What's left is for the 2 of you to settle things. I shouldn't interfere anymore. Yin Yang murmured, "Father, are you satisfied with the way I've handled things?" He closed his eyes and did not open them for a long time. 2 drops of tears slowly trickled down his cheeks. Yin Yang seemed to see old Dugu's silhouette slowly appear amidst the illusory void, looking at him with a benevolent expression as usual, nodding with a smile. It was as if he was saying, "Child, I'll be satisfied no matter what you do." Yin Yang exhaled with his mouth open, feeling a surge of emotions that he could not control. Saber severing the secular world. Yin Yang sucked in a long breath. "Father, actually, I really want to keep him. I don't want to kill him with a single slash. This slash will not only sever his worldly affairs." Chapter 706. After a long time, Yin Yang put away the items left behind by Ouyang Shaoxi, but the two pieces of the treasure map were not placed together. He took old Dugu's piece of paper and sniffed it greedily. He said softly, "Father, don't worry. Haven't I already gotten back what belongs to us?" He did not linger any longer. With a long howl, he punched a hole in the ground with his palm and buried Ouyang Shaoxi's body deep within. Then, he waved his hands again and again. In an instant, the sky was filled with dark clouds. The dark clouds became thicker and thicker. With a sudden clap of thunder, torrential rain began to fall. It landed on the ground that had already been burnt red. The rain continued to fall. The weather was still cold, so there should not have been such a downpour, nor should there have been thunder and lightning. However, under Yin Yang's control, the rain fell just like that. "I was the one who burned and destroyed this place. No matter what, I have to make up for it." The rain continued to fall, restoring the vitality of this place as much as possible. Yin Yang's silhouette had long disappeared into the rain. On the horizon, there was a clear distinction between the sun and the rain. On one side, it was raining cats and dogs, while on the other, it was dawn, with no clouds in sight. A dense purple mist rose from the horizon, and a red sun was about to leap out of the ground and appear in the mortal world again. Yin Yang was dressed in his usual purple robes, strolling leisurely on Tiantang City's Tongtian Street. He was like a celestial being who had descended from the heavens with purple mist gushing out from the east, and his expression was unusually calm. Yin Yang seemed to be moving slowly, but he was actually moving swiftly as he quietly entered a pawn shop on the main street of the city. Inside the pawn shop, Shui Wuyin, who was dressed like a shopkeeper, raised his head and met Yin Yang's gaze. He then lowered his head and did not make a sound. It was the two workers beside him who came forward to greet him. "Do you have any good stuff like that over here? Take it out and have a look." "The price isn't a problem," Yin Yang said with his hands behind his back. "Damn good stuff? That's a fortuitous encounter that can only be chanced upon and not sought." Shui Wuyin raised his head. "We really don't have it now. Since it's a good thing, there's no reason for it to die so easily. But if young master needs it, we can keep it for you in the future." Yin Yang snorted and said, "What are you talking about? What do you mean by luck but not by seeking? This young master has plenty of money. Why would I be afraid of not being able to buy good things? Things that don't open my eyes." His tone was displeased, and he turned around to leave unhappily. Shui Wuyin waited for a while before standing up. "You guys look after the shop. I'm going back to sleep. I'm sleepy." Shui Wuyin issued an order after the first unit arrived at a secret location. "There's an order from the higher-ups. There's no need to stay." At this time, the killers in the Dongqing district were almost at the end of their rope. There were originally tens of thousands of famous killers in the Jianghu, but now, there were less than 7,000 left. 70 to 80% of them had died. Although the so-called Grand Alliance of Assassins had not completely disappeared, it was only in name, and everyone was in a state of panic. On the other hand, the Jianghu heroes who were trapped outside still surrounded the area so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. They defended like an iron wall, but everyone's eyes were shining brightly. They were all calculating in their hearts. Now that the situation was clear, their side's victory was already a foregone conclusion. However, in this battle, would they be able to achieve anything in the end? This was a very real problem. Some of the quick-witted ones had already begun to contact others, forming cliques and forming alliances. At the center of the Dongqing district central area, Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan, the two top leaders of the assassin organizations, had gathered the 30 or so people with the highest cultivation base in the Grand Alliance of Assassins. How is it? Almost. Both of their gazes met, noticing the chilling glint in each other's eyes. It was almost time. Once the time was right, the two of them would lead the 30 to 40 people and charge out together. They would be able to carve out a path of blood, perhaps without much effort. During this period of stalemate, were Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan really unable to leave? No, it was more that they did not want to leave. Ouyang Shaoxi had so many tricks that even the martial artists could think of. How could these two top-notch assassins not have thought of it? If it were only the two of them, they would have left long ago. Even Yun Yang would not be able to guard against them. Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan were not ordinary characters. Even the most conservative way of putting it was to say that they were ruthless characters of a formidable character. Since the moment the Dragon Hide treasure map had been revealed, they had begun their ploy, borrowing Yun Yang's ploy to launch their own ambush. The initial agreement of the Alliance of Assassins was a hindrance to them, but it was not as if there was no room for evasion. However, their ploy required killing as well. Amidst the bloodbath, the turning point that they desired would be born, the timing that they desired. Both sides of the battle were constantly losing people. The martial artists were losing their men and were being drained. Hong Zhan and Hen Bieli were being drained and killed as well. They were rapidly reducing the number of assassins on their side. Although the tens of thousands of assassins on the side of the assassins were known to be world-renowned, there were not many true experts among them. Furthermore, even if these experts were forced to stay here, they might not be of one mind with the two men. What Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan needed, or perhaps their fundamental goal, was to eliminate these people or slowly change them. Only by accomplishing this goal could they build the elite team that they truly desired, one that was much stronger than the most elite members of the two top assassin organizations. Up until now, the Alliance of Assassins was truly in the midst of a great wave washing away the sand in this battle of the century. Those with a low cultivation base had died long ago, those who were unlucky had perished long ago as well. Those who could survive in the end not only had a high cultivation base, but they were also blessed with great luck. In the martial world, luck was the most important word. Most of the time, it was even more crucial than a profound cultivation base. Some people could always have a fortuitous encounter, turning misfortune into fortune even when they met with misfortune. However, some people, despite having a profound cultivation base, died the moment they emerged. Needless to say, this was the work of luck. It was inexplicably domineering. Since the beginning of time, only those who possessed such luck could walk to the pinnacle. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou were like this, including the two assassin leaders themselves. Those who were lucky had always walked further and more steadily than those who were more capable. So what if one had the best potential in the world? If one was killed the moment one made a name for oneself in the martial world, it would be useless no matter how good one's potential was. It was especially so for Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan, thinking that they were going to obtain the treasure and achieve great things in the future, so they especially needed such lucky people. It did not matter if one was unlucky, but it would not be good if one was a burden to them. Through this period of continuous fighting, these top-notch assassins had indeed been forged a second time, compressing them into a solid block. As for the timing that Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan were waiting for, it was to wait for the assassins outside to die out. Then, they could break out of the encirclement easily. First of all, these people were a small target, making it easy to escape. Secondly, they had been fighting as hard as they had promised in the heavenly oath that day. They had been fighting and staying here, persisting until now. They had not gone anywhere. When had they ever broken the oath? Now, the others had died because of their lack of ability and bad luck. They were the only ones who were still alive. What else could they do? Of course, they had to strive for survival and fight elsewhere. Wasn't this the right thing to do? Gold can only be seen after panning the yellow sand. Hen Bieli was very pleased, extremely pleased with his plan. There were still more than 7,000 people left. If they could hold on for another 2 days, these 7,000 people could probably be reduced to 3,000, or even 2,000. When that time came, they would organize a breakout. Other than themselves, the rest of the people would basically be wiped out. Then, naturally, they would leave in a group. The two assassin leaders' calculations could be said to be well planned. The layout within the layout could be said to be exquisite. However, things did not always go according to one's wishes. The sky had just brightened. The first rays of the morning sun had just leaped over the horizon. Rays of sunlight had just sprinkled onto the earth. Suddenly, a loud bang came from outside. Then, loud shouts and screams could be heard from the outside, one after another. It's time for the final attack. Those assassins don't have much strength left. Everyone, charge in. Charge. I'll go in first. The Dragonhide treasure map is mine. Why should you go in first? I'll go in first. There was another loud bang. From the east, dozens of people had already swarmed in. They pushed their way in, leveling all the buildings in front of them. Everything that obstructed their line of sight was flattened. Faced with the sudden change, the assassins stood up in shock. Disbelief was written all over their faces. It was clearly not the time yet. Judging by the situation these few days, it was normal for there to be another half a month's buffer. Why would they launch the final attack now? Are you guys no longer afraid? What makes you think that you can wipe us out in one fell swoop? Once one side made a move, the other side naturally did not want to be outdone. When someone shouted charge, many of them rushed out without a second thought. Following that, more people rushed in, muddle-headed. It had always been human nature to follow the crowd blindly, so there was nothing to be surprised about. Then, those who were more experienced and prudent gradually lost their composure when they heard the sounds of killing getting more and more intense. They rushed in and joined the fray. By the time those with particularly high cultivation base and patience had also rushed in, the situation had become uncontrollable and difficult to stop. It was noisy in all directions as countless people streamed in. They had no choice but to rush in. If I don't go in, how am I going to get the treasure map? Driven by the same thought, the entire east side of the city was plunged into an atmosphere of deafening battle cries. The other three sides of Tiantang City were bathed in sunlight, only the east side of the city was shrouded in billowing smoke and dust. One could not even see their own fingers. The final battle had begun in advance under the guidance and impetus of some people with ulterior motives. On one side, the battle was in full swing, but on the other side, it was calm. In a tavern outside the east side of the city. The 10 Yama kings of the Sanluo court were all gathered here, each with a cup of tea in front of them. They looked bored. Silhouettes flashed as Yun Xiaoyao, Fang Mafei, and the rest entered. The brother who won the prize yesterday is heaven and earth, congratulations. Today's prize was 2 words, very, very large words. Some people said that there was no place in life that was not a martial world. Therefore, the 2 words martial world were specially written. I hope that everyone will pay attention to their own martial world in life, and that they will conquer their own martial world. I am in a bad mood today. Chapter 707. The 10 kings of the Yama underworld seemed to be waiting for something. When they saw Yun Xiaoyao enter, they perked up immediately. Yun Xiaoyao did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. There's something that I don't understand. Please dispel my doubts. The 10 kings of the Yama underworld looked at each other and said, Please speak, Your Highness. Come to think of it, what puzzles me the most is. Yun Xiaoyao continued, the few great kings are martial artists as well, and even more so, top-notch assassins. Are you not interested in this Dragonhide treasure map that is said to contain the greatest secret of the universe? But it looks like all of you are very calm. You don't even intend to interfere. First Court King Qingguang chuckled bitterly and said, How can we not be interested? It's just that we have the heart but not the strength. Yun Xiaoyao asked, Where do you begin? Because, even if we get our hands on the treasure map, we can hardly use it. King Chujiang sighed and smiled bitterly as well. King Yun may not know this, but the cultivation method that we cultivate is not mystical qi. No matter how mystical the legacy of the 17th Master of the Abyss is, it's only trash to us. It's useless even if we get it. Emperor Song smiled at Yun Xiaoyao. Not mystical qi? How is that possible? Yun Xiaoyao was stunned. It was the first time he had heard of such a thing. All the cultivators in the Tianxian continent cultivate mystical qi. Are you not using it as the source of your cultivation? What you cultivate is yin qi, which is different from the rest. It has also determined that your cultivation path is destined to be different from ordinary cultivators, Yun Yang explained with a smile as he walked in from outside. Young Master Yun has a keen eye. We are impressed. The 10 kings of the Yama underworld smiled at the same time. Regarding this, even if Yun Xiaoyao had not asked, they would have taken the initiative to explain. This was because it was now the last moment. With their cold eyes, the 2 dragonhide treasure maps in Hen Bieli's hands could very well be returned to their rightful owners and returned here. If they did not make things clear now, misunderstandings would inevitably arise. That would be unpleasant. Therefore, the kings of the concourse of the underworld simply used this topic to clarify the matter and eliminate any possible differences between them. They had been waiting for this opportunity all along. The opportunity to explain. They've already started fighting over there. The time to settle this once and for all has come. Yin Yang smiled. Naturally, there was a hint of coldness in his words. Young Master Yun, this matter. Is the net about to be closed? First Court King Qingguang asked. Yin Yang smiled. The main objective of this scenario has been achieved. There's no point in dragging the remaining arrangements. After this is over, I will give you all a big gift. King Chujiang laughed heartily and said, let's have a pleasant cooperation. Your honor's words are truly too courteous. I'm ashamed to accept it, and it would be impolite to refuse. Yin Yang replied with a smile, why would I feel ashamed to accept it? We won't be able to use this great gift anyway. Instead of wasting it, why not help all of you to reach a higher level? It's alright to accept it. The 10 Yama kings' eyes lit up when they heard that. What kind of big gift is there that they can't use? But we can't use the Dragonhide treasure map, but they can. Then, wouldn't the gift be Yin energy? Thinking of this, the 10 of them beamed with joy and were somewhat impatient. Yun Xiaoyao frowned and asked worriedly, Yin Yang, do we really have to do this? Yin Yang replied, this is a foregone conclusion. It has to be done. Yun Xiaoyao sighed. This is a little, Yin Yang said, what is a little? This is what it means to get it done once and for all. Yun Xiaoyao sighed. Yin Yang said, it doesn't matter if you're willing or not. Personally, I'm even more indifferent. As long as Yutong can bear it. Yun Xiaoyao chuckled bitterly. Finally, he heaved a long sigh and said nothing more. Let's talk about it after noon. Yin Yang looked at the east of the city where the smoke and dust billowed. He narrowed his eyes and said softly, but now, our people can already withdraw. The battle at the east of the city was still ongoing. The carnage was getting more and more intense. The atmosphere of the battle this time was much more intense than before. The stench of blood had almost reached the horizon. The Assassin's League obviously knew that the battle had reached its final stage. Whether or not they could survive depended on the final outcome of today's battle. The martial world heroes who thought that victory was within their grasp did not slack off at all. They knew that this was the most crucial moment. Whether or not they could seize the treasure map and even get a share of the loot, today was the key. If they missed this day, the chances would be slim and would never be seen again. If the assassins managed to escape successfully, not only would it be difficult to find them in this vast world, even their own lives would be in danger. Who were the people who were trapped now? They were all famous assassins of this world. Just based on the assassination methods of these people alone, it was not something he could withstand alone. Not to mention that these people might have obtained the treasures and inherited the teachings of the 17th Master of the Abyss. How could he not seek revenge for today's incident? These people's desire for vengeance was extremely strong. If they missed this day, they might not be able to sleep in peace for the rest of their lives. Even their children and grandchildren would be in danger at any time. Therefore, no matter what, they had to annihilate all of these assassins here, to prevent any future troubles and solve the problem once and for all. Both sides were resolute in their determination to fight to the death. It was to the extent that no one noticed that among the martial world's troops, there were thousands of people retreating silently, withdrawing from the battle. After that, those who had left the battle would disappear with a turn after leaving the sight of the main force, especially after finding something to hide behind. It was as if they had never participated in this battle of the century. It was probably because the battle was too intense and too bleak that no one knew who these people were. Even when some of them had left the battle continued and so did the killing. How could no one not notice that their side was missing a little in the chaotic battle of tens of thousands of people? At this moment, everyone was in a frenzy of killing. There was only one thing in their eyes: killing. When they first charged in, most of them were thinking about the Dragonhide treasure map and how they could escape unscathed after obtaining the map. Now, however, it was purely a battle of life and death. The number of assassins was decreasing rapidly. Due to the restriction of the Assassins' League's heavenly oath that day, even if Hen Bieli and the others had a plan, it was difficult for them to carry it out. They could not leave the battlefield now and abandon the assassins who had sworn the oath together. What they could do was to preserve their strength as much as possible and charge back and forth on the battlefield. That was all, there was nothing more they could do. However, as long as they could hold out until the moment the Assassins' League was completely annihilated, their initial plan could still be carried out. Therefore, although the current situation did not match their expectations, it was still not too bad. It was not too difficult to deal with. Chapter 708. Currently, on the battlefield, rumbling noises could be heard everywhere. The Qi-Jin collisions between high-level cultivators were like this. Suddenly, a loud rumbling sound rang out. Perhaps it was because the shockwaves of Qi-Jin were too much, but the ground cracked open without any warning. It was at least several hundred feet long, but it was unknown if it was because of the shockwaves of Qi-Jin, but the ground cracked open without any warning. The sudden appearance of this crack was too unexpected. It caught everyone off guard, causing at least a few hundred people within the area to feel the air beneath their feet. They fell down just like that. There were still many people who were squeezed in the surrounding area. They staggered and fell down together in confusion, like dumplings being dropped into a pot. In the next moment, no one from either side made a move to rescue them. Instead, countless hidden weapons were thrown down. Although the situation of the battle was clear and the martial artists had the upper hand, it was always the best strategy to eliminate their opponents as soon as possible. Everyone had to do something like beating a drowning dog. Those who fell down, other than their own people, there were also people from the other side. As the saying goes, it was better to kill the wrong person than to let the wrong person go. As long as one did not fall down, there was no need to worry about the lives of others. Strictly speaking, the people on their own side might become their future competitors. This crack directly became the eruption point that worsened the situation. The bestial nature and deep-rooted bad habits of humans were completely triggered at this moment. As a result, a series of screams and curses came from the other side. But it only lasted for a moment before there were no more sounds. After all, it was countless people who threw their hidden weapons together. How could there be the slightest chance of a fluke? Human life, in such an atmosphere of battle, was really insignificant and worthless. Then, another unforeseen event followed. A ray of sword light suddenly lit up from the periphery and flipped into the sky. It was like a rolling dragon that spun rapidly in the air. Following a sudden roar, it turned into a multicolored light dragon that was at least 10 feet thick. It shook its head and tail and fiercely swooped down from the sky. Wherever it passed, there was no distinction between friend or foe. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, and the eyes were filled with red. An indiscriminate attack. In the crowd, someone bellowed furiously, "You Jinfei, you've gone mad." The sword light that was like a roller didn't stop in the slightest as it whistled through the crowd. Wherever it passed, at least 100 people were killed by this sword. Because of this dazzling, resplendent sword light had killed 100 people in succession, causing its momentum to accumulate to the extreme. With another loud bang, it forcefully crashed into the group of assassins. Hand over the secret map. An explosive roar came from the vast sword light. Its might was shocking, and it could be said to be the strongest in recent days. Hen Bieli hollered, "Kill him." More than 30 Dao Realm assassins attacked at the same time, targeting that dazzling sword light. These people had only prioritized self-preservation and had never given their all. Now that they had erupted abruptly, and with so many of them bursting out in unison, it was truly a net of light that was like a waterfall. Countless sword lights and fists were like a downpour that drowned the world, destroying the sword light in an instant. As the pinnacle assassins retaliated and attacked in unison, a shrill cry came from the sword light. 2 legs flew off, followed by 2 arms. Finally, a head flew into the sky, its face still filled with indescribable brutality. It was obvious that this person had not expected to be killed in a single exchange of blows. Among the crowd, those who knew this person sighed inwardly. The berserk dragon swordsman, Yu Jinfei, was a renowned top-notch expert in the martial world. His cultivation base had long reached an extremely high realm above Dao realm. As he roamed the martial world, he rarely had a worthy opponent. He had even been ranked 6th on the Tianxian swordsman leaderboard in the past. Yes, the 6th place, which was Bai Yishue's current ranking, or rather, Bai Yishue's predecessor. In spite of this, he was ranked based on his actual cultivation base and battle achievements. Compared to a certain someone who managed to survive by sheer luck when he fought Jun Moyan, he was much more deserving of the title. All in all, this fellow was an extremely ruthless character. That was why he had the intention to unleash a powerful skill and leave immediately after snatching the item. This was obvious, anyone could see it. Based on the current battle situation and the intensity of the battle, it wasn't too arrogant of this fellow to stand out here. If the battle participants only displayed this much battle strength, perhaps this mad dragon swordsman Yu Jinfei would really be able to fulfill his wish. The problem, however, was that none of the true experts in this battle had truly exerted their full strength or used a killing technique. Therefore, he, the one who had stood out, could only return in defeat. Therefore, the ease with which he had died seemed unexpected, but it was completely within reason. Of course, it was appropriate. This was also luck. Even until this day, Bai Yishue's cultivation base was still difficult to rank among the world's top swordsmen. However, he had been able to escape from the hands of the unrivaled swordsman. This was his luck. On the other hand, the berserk dragon swordsman Yu Jinfei had such a high cultivation base, so what? He had died instantly. In spite of this, the battle did not ease up with Yu Jinfei's death. Instead, it grew more and more extreme. There were more and more experts among the crowd who were unleashing powerful skills. There had never been a lack of hidden talents in the martial world. Now that the battle had come to this point, it was basically at its end. Everyone had no intention of holding back, giving it their all. As a result, the battle became more and more intense. There were at least dozens or hundreds of people collapsing almost every moment. If one had to point out something that was more unexpected, it would probably be that the batches of people who had collapsed were mostly experts with profound cultivation base. Throughout the period of time that the two camps had been fighting, the battle had been intense, but there had been very few top-notch experts who had unleashed all their skills. It was only now that they were at the final juncture. First, there was the abrupt appearance of a crack in the ground, burying a batch of people and drawing the curtains of the extreme battle. Then, there was Yu Jinfei's instant death. It made everyone understand that although the number of people here had decreased, they were all experts that were rarely seen in the martial world, the batch that was more outstanding. It was precisely because everyone understood this that they knew who was the real threat to them. Once the opportunity presented itself, they worked together, intentionally or otherwise, to take down a batch of these people. In spite of this, the number of people on the assassin's side was still the minority. Their numbers were decreasing rapidly as they fell one after another with blood splattering everywhere. In the blink of an eye, there were less than 100 people left. Henbieli's long sword suddenly trembled, emitting a radiant glow as he hollered, "Everyone, be careful. Break out." As soon as the last two words were uttered, the winds and clouds surged and the skies turned upside down. Almost 100 top-notch assassins who were lucky enough to survive suddenly abandoned their original positions at the same time. Displaying their astonishing abilities, they slaughtered a path of blood through the crowd and converged on the spot where Henbieli's voice came from. Almost at the same time, Henbieli and Hong Zhan, with their sabers and swords in hand, triggered a piercing hiss to their heart's content, shocking the entire crowd. A beam of sword energy and a beam of saber energy swept out, stretching far and wide. The energy of saber and sword converged, wiping out all the enemies around them in an instant, temporarily clearing out a safe zone for their own side. Boom! As the waves of blood filled the air, the group of top-notch assassins had already gathered together and began to charge in a single direction. Kill your way out. WeChat event. The winner yesterday was Ling Hanwu. Congratulations. From today onwards, due to certain reasons, the winners will no longer be announced in advance. They will be announced the next day. For a period of time. Tomorrow is the start of the college entrance examination. I wish the students of the Feng family the best of luck and success in the examination. Chapter 709. With Henbieli and Hong Zhan in the lead, the power of 100 pinnacle assassins had successfully coalesced into one. It was like a giant sword that could not be separated, cutting through all obstacles and rushing forward with irresistible force. Their momentum was unstoppable, and all who stood in their way were swept away. Wherever they passed, no one could stop them in the blink of an eye. They charged straight into the middle of the martial artists' encirclement as if they were crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It was at this moment that the combined sword light of the 100 assassins' allied army suddenly shot up into the sky. Layers of sword light flickered as sword mountains appeared one after another, falling with the force of an avalanche. This scene caused everyone's hearts to almost stop beating. More than 20 pinnacle swordsmen had unleashed their ultimate skills at the same time. Any one of these people was not inferior to the berserk dragon swordsman, Yu Jianfei. Their cunning and state of mind far surpassed theirs. They had been holding back and concealing their abilities, intending to wait for the enemy to exhaust themselves. Now, however, it had come to a point where they had to stop and intercept them. If they did not act now, the assassins would break out of the encirclement and leave. The Milky Way overturned. Henbieli's howl was thunderous. His beard fluttered as he took the lead and attacked forcefully. Streaks of pitch-black traces appeared in the sword light that he had split. It was a sign that he had sliced through the void, carving out spatial traces. The force of his attack was terrifying. There was also Hong Zhan. He followed behind Henbieli, bellowing angrily. His saber turned into a raging dragon that soared into the sky, shaking its head and wagging its tail as it charged head-on into the mountain of swords that was descending from above. Both of them charged forward without regard for their own safety. Which one of the 100 assassins who followed behind them was not an expert who had been through hundreds of battles? How could they not know what choice they should make? All of them performed the art of becoming one with their swords, detonating their cultivation base to its limit as they charged forward without backing down. Therefore, the moment the absolute attacks of both sides collided, the commotion caused by the collision was literally earth-shattering. All the buildings within a 3,000 feet radius were razed to the ground. Dust filled the air. At this moment, a streak of blood shot up into the sky. No one knew who was injured. However, at this moment, both sides were busy shouting and attacking with all their might. They really didn't pay attention to who was the first to be injured. Kill. When the smoke and dust finally dispersed, the Jianghu side was in a mess. Everyone who was affected by the attack was sent flying dozens of feet away. The situation of the assassins was not good either. More than 30 of them fell silently to the ground with blood and flesh flying everywhere. The rest of them were also injured. They staggered backwards, and only a few of them could stand up straight. The Jianghu people did not relax at all. With a shout from all directions, thousands of people surrounded them. Thousands of people surrounded less than 100 people. Once the encirclement was completed, it was truly an iron bucket encirclement. Not even a drop of water could escape. Hen Bieli sucked in a deep breath and forcefully stopped himself from retreating, but he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He knew that even though the encirclement had been established, it hadn't been completed yet, and once he was encircled once more, then he would be finished. They had to take advantage of this opportunity to rush out in one go. Only then would they have a chance of survival. Fortunately, everything that had happened so far was still within his expectations. He believed that everything would go smoothly in the future. With a loud roar and a tug at Hongzhan, both of them dashed out at the same time. Their aura seemed to be even stronger than before. After all, these two people's abilities were far beyond the norm. In the blink of an eye, they had already slaughtered the martial world experts who were either retreating or unconscious from the impact. It was the delicate moment and the enemy's front line was gone and the reinforcements had yet to arrive. The path to survival was unobstructed, dawn was right before them. Hen Bieli's spirits were lifted as he roared, "The path to survival has appeared. Everyone, follow me." Amidst the chaos, the two assassin leaders turned back for a peek, a hint of glee in their eyes. There were close to 60 people in the team of assassins behind them. It was a few more than the duo's best expectations, and every single one of them was a top-notch expert. Of course, there would be a considerable number of casualties in the subsequent journey to break out of the encirclement until they reached the safe zone. However, at the very most, there would not be too many casualties in the end. A conservative estimate would be that there would still be about 25 to 30 people when they reached the safe zone. This number of people could be guaranteed to be the pinnacle of the pinnacle, the elite of the elite. And without exception, all of them were truly lucky. Assassins who could survive until now were definitely existences of exceptional luck. These were enough. More than 60 assassins mustered all their strength and swarmed forward, charging towards the path of survival, the gap in the enemy's defense. There were less than 100 people guarding the gap. It could be said that the outcome of the assassins breaking out of the tight encirclement was already a foregone conclusion. The martial world's guests had naturally noticed this as well, coming to the same conclusion. Everyone's eyes were filled with indignation. In spite of this was a situation that Hen Bieli and Hongzhan had calculated long ago. The two assassin leaders' grasp of the situation and their analysis of strength were impeccable and precise. In fact, this was the key to their survival in the martial world and their everlasting prosperity. If they had calculated wrongly, they might have died a long time ago. However, just as the assassins were about to unleash their prowess and kill the martial world people at the final gap, just as they were about to break out of the encirclement, suddenly, a horn resounded in the sky, followed by a solemn and authoritative voice. "By His Highness the Crown Prince's verbal order, kill the rebels, exterminate the assassins, and restore Yutang's clear skies." The sudden order made Hen Bieli and Hongzhan widen their eyes in unison, their gazes filled with disbelief. What was going on? It was a kill order from His Highness the Crown Prince of Yutang. Was this a joke? For a moment, the two assassin leaders were dumbfounded. In spite of this, it was obvious that it was not a joke. Following the order, movements could be heard from all directions. As they looked around, they were shocked to see countless archers armed with deicide bows scattered all over the flat ground, the broken walls, the high walls, the big trees, and the high-rise buildings. They were densely packed, almost everywhere. All of them were dressed in black military uniforms. On their uniforms, there was the emblem of the Crown Prince's 6th Battalion. This was the troop from the Crown Prince's residence. They were the direct armed forces of His Highness the Crown Prince. It was clear just by looking at the military uniforms. What neat movements! What a magnificent military formation! At this moment, there were at least 10,000 deicide archers pointing their chilling arrowheads at the 60 or so assassins who had just managed to charge out with great difficulty. Everyone had already drawn their bows to the fullest, their gazes cold. Once the order was given, thousands of arrows would be released. Chapter 710. It was a kill order from His Highness, the Crown Prince of Yutong. Was this a joke? For a moment, the two assassin leaders were dumbfounded. In spite of this, it was obvious that it was not a joke. Following the command, there was movement from all directions. As they looked around, they were shocked to see countless archers armed with deicide bows scattered all over the ground, the broken walls, the high walls, the big trees, and the tall buildings in all directions. They were densely packed and could be seen everywhere. All of them were dressed in black military uniforms. There was the emblem of the Crown Prince's 6th Battalion on their uniforms. These were the troops from the Crown Prince's residence. They were the direct armed forces of His Highness the Crown Prince. It was clear just by looking at the military uniforms. What a neat movement, what a magnificent military formation. There were at least 10,000 deicide archers in all directions, pointing their chilling arrowheads at the 60 assassins who had just charged out with great difficulty. Everyone had already drawn their bows to the fullest, their gazes cold. Once the order was given, thousands of arrows would be released. Henbieli bellowed in rage, stopping abruptly and hollering, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, what do you mean by this?" The reason why he and his men had come to Tiantang City was because they were hired by His Highness the Crown Prince. Why would they turn against him and attack him at this critical juncture? Could it be that the Crown Prince wanted the Dragonhide treasure map as well? It was a pity that before Henbieli could figure it out and ask for an explanation, he heard a thunderous holler from the opposite side, "Fire!" Swoosh, 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 Henbieli felt his vision darken. How could he not know that countless deicide archers had released their arrows at the same time? The pitch-black arrows blotted out all the light in the sky. "Ah!" Henbieli cried out in hatred, reacting swiftly. He rolled away, sticking close to the ground. As he did so, he collected the corpses on the ground and placed them in front of him, resisting the might of the deicide archers' arrows. As a top-notch assassin, he knew all too well the power of the deicide bow. It was a piece of cake to shoot through a person's body from front to back. It was too common. Even if 5 to 6 people were piled up together, it would not be difficult to shoot through them. So at this time, his first thought was to find more cover, the more the better. Seeing that Henbieli was quick to react, Hongzhan and the rest of the assassins were veterans who had been through hundreds of battles. They swiftly found their own cover and hid themselves. In spite of this, those who managed to dodge the rain of arrows were only the 20 people in front. Most of the assassins at the back were slightly weaker. Most of them were still staggering and dizzy from the intense shock. If Henbieli and the rest had successfully broken out of the encirclement, they could have gone with the flow. Naturally, it would not have been a problem. However, when they were faced with the rain of arrows, they were powerless and could not react at all. By the time they realized that something was wrong, it was already too late for them to dodge. They could only grit their teeth and block with the weapons in their hands. Clang, 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 it was the sound of a weapon blocking an arrow, as well as the sound of a deicide arrow entering a body. Then, a series of screams rang out. The rain of arrows caused half of the 60 or so peak assassins in the Jianghu to die. More than half. Each of these people was a top-notch expert, a superb assassin. Usually, each of them possessed the ability to evade the deicide arrows perfectly. As long as they were given time and space, it would only be a matter of time before these 60 people killed the 10,000 archers instead. But right now, in such a special environment, at the delicate moment when the assassins were exhausted from the battle, the deicide archers had suddenly appeared and fired like a storm, turning the place into a hell for the assassins. There was not even a chance for them to find cover. A certain ace assassin who was quick to react had only managed to collect 3 to 4 corpses to block the arrows for himself. In the final round of shooting, he and his shield had become porcupines. It was probably because he had used up all his luck in the previous battle. Hen Bieli's resentful voice boomed in the air. What a great crown prince of Yutong! What a great crown prince of Yutong! Your father has seen through you. Amidst his sorrowful laughter, a cold command rang out once more, fire. The second round of deicide arrows was fired, the rain of arrows covering the sky. After 3 rounds of arrows, there were no more than 5 people left alive from the entire charging team of assassins. Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan were included among them. As for the other 3, they were renowned assassins in the martial world. Strictly speaking, they were not inferior to Hen Bieli, Hong Zhan, or the 10 kings of the concourse of the underworld. However, all 5 of them were injured. The corpses that covered their bodies had turned into giant hedgehogs with arrows and spikes. It was supported by a dense number of arrows, standing upright as if it were a living special arrow hedgehog. Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan were howling with righteous indignation. It was obvious that the rage in their hearts had broken through the horizon. Both of them had turned around to look at the ground littered with the assassins' corpses. They were furious beyond words. They felt as if their hearts were about to explode at this very moment. The martial world experts who had caught up from behind looked at each other, their faces pale. For a moment, they dared not move recklessly. They had been riled up just a moment ago, but now they felt like their calves were cramping. In all fairness, with the current lineup of the martial world experts, if Yutong did not panic, it would be difficult for them to win even if they sent out the entire nation's army. They could only be killed instead. The saying that a pinnacle expert could fight against 10,000 people alone was not an exaggeration. At the very least, it would not be a problem for them to break out of the encirclement. In spite of this outcome was built on the foundation of not panicking. Any cultivator, especially an expert cultivator, would usually have a psychological quality that was superior to a military soldier. The more profound one's cultivation base was, the better their mental state would be. Therefore, under normal circumstances, when a military soldier faced a martial artist, it would be difficult to shake the other party even if they had 100 times the military strength. Just like when the Maai sect had joined Dongxian, Dongxuan's combat power had skyrocketed immediately. This was the uniqueness of the martial world's influence in the war. However, compared to military soldiers, the martial world people had their weaknesses as well. First, it was difficult for them to form a team. They were used to fighting alone, and there was a limit to their fighting spirit. Secondly, the mentality of self-preservation and retreat had always been hidden within them. Thirdly, and most importantly, most of the martial world people could only fight when the wind was blowing. When they had the upper hand, their combat power could be unleashed to the fullest, but once they were facing a formidable opponent, their fighting spirit would be extinguished immediately. Their fighting spirit would be weaker than an ordinary soldier's, and their combat power would be greatly reduced. Just like now, was Yutong's deicide archer strong? Yes, very, very strong. In spite of this, it was an entirely different matter to say that they could inflict fatal damage to the martial world heroes. However, the people of Jianghu City were afraid. That was because the previous round of arrow rain had instantly wiped out 30 to 40 peak experts. After 3 rounds of arrow rain, the 60 or so peerless assassins who had just barely managed to break through their heavy encirclement were all killed, and only a few were left. This result was 2F** king terrifying. It was because of this situation that they had completely overlooked the fact that most of Hen Bieli and the other assassins' combat power had actually been expended on them. Furthermore, the timing of this Yutong troops' appearance was too coincidental. The deicide archers were too targeted, and the quantity was astonishing. Only with such accumulation could they achieve such a result. It could be said that such a result could never be replicated. In spite of this, the martial world people would not think so. What they saw was the 3 volleys of deicide archers' arrows. Their best effort was futile, and they had almost been wiped out by the assassins who had escaped. How could they not be shocked? In their hearts, they believed that as long as they had not reached the realm of immortals who could soar into the sky, they would not stand a chance against such an attack. Thinking about it, another question arose in everyone's mind. Didn't Yutong's officials say that they were not going to interfere? They had even specially set up a venue. Why were they interfering now? The person who gave the order just now said that he was acting on the Crown Prince's order. Was this Yutong's Crown Prince's personal order or the Emperor of Yutong's? Furthermore, was the target only limited to the assassins, or were they planning to wipe them out as well? Chapter 7:11. Now, all the Jianghu people present were eager to know the answer, because they were all afraid. They would not have been afraid if it had been any other time. With their cultivation base, it was no big deal to take a few deicide bows head-on. But what time was it now? They were exhausted from the battle, their cultivation base gone, and they were facing 10,000 deicide bows, 10,000 of them. What did it mean to shoot 10,000 arrows at once? Did they not see that the assassins had turned into porcupines? Which one of these people had a lower cultivation base than them? Fortunately, their doubts were quickly dispelled. With a swoosh, a person appeared high in the sky, his robes fluttering in the wind. He was intimidating without being angry. It was Yutong's King Xiaoyao, Yun Xiaoyao. General Li? What is going on? Yun Xiaoyao asked sternly. I have promised the martial world heroes on behalf of Yutong officials that I will not participate in this matter. Why have you all appeared here now and killed so many people with deicide bows? Generally, you have to give me an explanation. Immediately. On the opposite side, General Li, who was leading the team, cupped his fists and said, Please do not be angry, Your Highness. This lowly general is only following orders. Yun Xiaoyao retorted angrily, following orders? Whose orders? General Li cupped his fists and said, This lowly general has received His Highness's decree from the East Palace. His Highness does not target the martial world heroes, so the original promise is still valid. However, these assassins are people who have done many evil deeds. None of them can be spared. Yun Xiaoyao's expression was dark as he said, This doesn't make sense. Assassins are part of the martial world as well. It is unreasonable to target them like this. General Li said, There is another reason for this. Does King Yun still remember that many of Yutong's officials were assassinated some time ago, including members of the royal family? These cases only happened after these assassins arrived. These assassins are all murderers. His Highness has a clear understanding of the situation and discerned the cause. Although he can't confirm the hirer for now, it is a good thing as long as he can capture all the assassins in the world in one fell swoop. There will be less trouble in the future. Removing the firewood from the bottom of the cauldron is to eliminate the danger and hidden dangers from the root. I hope that King Xiaoyao will not make things difficult for this lowly general. Yun Xiaoyao pondered and said, No, the matters of the martial world shall be settled in the martial world. To take advantage of another's perilous state, to carry out a sneak attack, and to go back on your word, is not the behavior of a gentleman. This will not be allowed. General Li said, The Emperor's order is as firm as a mountain, how can it be disobeyed? If King Yun wishes to stop us, you can remonstrate with His Highness the Crown Prince, but I still have to take action. Just as the two parties were in a stalemate and their words were becoming more and more indecisive, Yun Yang appeared in the sky with a flash of purple and hollered in a low voice, General Li, we understand your intention of coming here, especially His Highness the Crown Prince's intention. However, the reality now was that all the assassins present were either dead or injured. At most, there were only a few left, and it was difficult for them to cause any more trouble. The heavens were merciful, so there was no need to kill them all. If I really go back on my word, it will damage His Majesty's reputation and my father's reputation greatly. Who will bear this loss? General Li? General Li's expression became awkward, and his hesitation was obvious. At this moment, everyone, including Hen Bieli, Hong Zhan, and the rest, felt a deep sense of gratitude towards Yun Yang, who was in the sky. Who would have thought that it would be the person we wanted to kill who would speak up for us and save our lives at the very last moment when we were in a hopeless situation and could barely escape? The feeling was a mixture of emotions that was hard to describe. As for the martial world heroes who surrounded them, they too gave Yun Xiaoyao and his son a thumbs up. A gentleman repaid kindness with kindness and repaid enmity with honesty. There was a clear bottom line. What the Yun family had done was the real bottom line. This was the textbook behavior of a gentleman. This was the magnanimity of a great nation, the magnanimity of a great family. He was indeed Yutang's King Xiaoyao. He was indeed Yutang's young master Yun. He was indeed graceful and charming. General Li hesitated and murmured, "This." Yun Yang chuckled and said, "There's no smoke without fire, but the League of Assassins has been reduced from tens of thousands of assassins to only 5 people now, and they're all half-crippled and decadent characters. It's hard for them to achieve anything more. I believe that His Highness the Crown Prince won't blame you when he finds out." General Li was still in a difficult position as he said, "Since Your Highness and the young prince have said so, this lowly general has nothing else to say. It's useless to insist. However, even if the 5 of them are spared, the 2 maps must be left behind so that this lowly general can give an explanation to His Highness the Crown Prince." Once he said this, Hen Bieli, Hong Zhan, and the other 4 assassins lifted their heads abruptly, the hatred in their eyes almost materializing. What a beautiful way to put it. He didn't want to kill them all. He just wanted to leave some physical evidence and make an explanation. It seemed reasonable, but who couldn't hear the truth behind it? So this was the real reason. The real reason was indeed here. The martial world heroes outside burst into an uproar upon hearing his words. "What are you talking about? Leave the Dragonhide treasure map behind? We've fought for so long, sacrificing hundreds of thousands of lives to wipe out 99% of the League of Assassins. Now, you, who've been sitting on the sidelines and waiting for us to be exhausted, are going to intervene and leave it behind just because you say so? If you really wanted it, why didn't you come out and snatch it earlier? What's the meaning of coming out now? How can you be so shameless? If it weren't for Yutang's official decree, we would have King run off to fight God knows where. How can we stay here? You're obviously toying with us by playing this game now. You don't just want to eat the meat, you don't even want to let the soup go. Are you going to deal with all the spectators as well? Are you going to play us to our deaths and wipe out the skilled cultivators of the martial world? How can you be so ruthless?" It was obvious that the martial world's martial artists were overthinking things. Their paranoia was acting up due to the chaos in their hearts. With the martial world's current abilities, once they could no longer suppress the fear in their hearts and erupted in reverse, the entire Tiantang city would probably be destroyed. Honestly, there was no doubt that this was not a difficult matter for the martial world's manpower gathered in Tiantang city. Just as everyone was filled with rage and fear, ready to fight with their lives at any time, Yun Yang spoke again. His tone was filled with displeasure. "General Li, you're wrong. Before this, my father has already asked for His Majesty's permission and opened the door for this incident. With His Majesty's own permission, no one from Yutang is allowed to participate in the martial world's turmoil, nor are they allowed to covet the 2 Dragonhide treasure maps. There is no room for error." Chapter 712. General Li looked troubled. This lowly general is only following orders. Why must the Crown Prince make things difficult for this lowly general? Yun Yang replied loudly, "Following orders. Whose soldier are you? What are the prerequisites for doing this? The Crown Prince has not thought things through and acted improperly. Are you still going to act willfully? If you really leave the Dragonhide treasure map behind, not only will Tiantang City become the target of the world, what will you be labeled as a traitor? What will you use to fill the gap? How many of our lives will be sacrificed because of these 2 treasure maps? Haven't you seen it yet? The so-called Dragonhide treasure map is just a huge problem." Yin Yang said, "Keeping it will only add to our troubles and become the source of disaster." General Li said, "But, don't say anything else to me. I'll explain to His Highness the Crown Prince later. It won't involve you. Yin Yang waved his hand and set the tone. General Li discussed with the other generals around him for a while before he finally raised his head and said, since young Master Yun has said so, we can let them go. We can give up on the Dragonhide treasure map, but the Dragonhide treasure map must never fall into the hands of Hen Bieli and the other assassins. Yin Yang was taken aback. What do you mean by that? The martial world's divine item belongs to the martial world. It's fated to obtain it. Why do we have to complicate matters? General Li said, Crown Prince Yun, your cultivation base is profound and you're not afraid of the murderous path, but we are. In today's battle, the last of the assassin's strength was lost in our hands. If they get the treasure, then, everyone understood what he meant when he said that. If Hen Bieli and the rest had gotten their hands on the treasure and intended to seek revenge, His Highness the Crown Prince would be the first to bear the brunt. The generals and deicide archers who had attended the meeting today would also be targeted. If not today, how many could withstand such a vengeance? This was obviously putting one's head under the blade. Yin Yang felt that the request was rather tricky as well. He said hesitantly, but, General Li said resolutely, young Master Yun, please forgive me for my rudeness. If this condition is not met, I dare not let Hen Bieli and the rest leave no matter what. Young Master Yun is magnanimous and magnanimous. We do not have such magnanimity. Yin Yang sighed. He was about to argue his case when Hen Bieli suddenly appeared amidst the pile of corpses. He raised his head and said in a low voice, young Master Yun, there's no need to argue anymore. I, Hen Bieli, have accepted today's kindness. But at this point, if we don't hand over the treasure map, then it's indeed impossible for us to leave. This is fate, and we accept our fate. Extreme hatred flashed in his eyes as he gritted his teeth and said, as long as I, Hen Bieli, am still alive, it will be time for me to repay young Master Yun's righteousness. Just as young Master said earlier, this Dragonhide treasure map is really a huge trouble, and forcefully keeping it will only add to our troubles and become the source of calamity. It's really insightful. We don't need this treasure map. As long as all of you are willing to let us go and allow us to leave safely, the Dragonhide treasure map will naturally be handed over with both hands. Hen Bieli's words were spoken with utmost sincerity, obviously coming from his heart. However, he did not say a single word about His Highness the Crown Prince. The true meaning behind his words was obvious. Yet, the unspoken message that he did not say was understood by everyone who heard it. It would be time for him to repay Yun Yang's life-saving grace as long as he was alive. In spite of this, the Crown Prince's vengeance would be avenged as long as he was alive. Kindness and vengeance went hand in hand. This was what the people of the martial world were like. As long as they were both alive, they would not rest until one of them was dead. It turned out that, not rest until one of them was dead, was a neutral term. It could be interpreted in a positive or negative way. Hen Bieli stood up, straightening his body slowly as he hollered, Hong Zhan. Hong Zhan stood up from another pile of corpses. There was a sharp arrow stuck in his right shoulder. The arrow had pierced through his body, and only the tail of the arrow was left in front of his chest. Blood was still flowing out of it. Big brother, Hong Zhan answered, his face filled with grief and anger. The other three assassins appeared one after another, their faces grim as their gazes swept across everyone before them. Hen Bieli gritted his teeth and closed his eyes, saying weakly, hand over, the treasure map. Big brother. Hong Zhan cried out, his eyes rimmed with tears. They had set up so many traps and laid so many traps just to keep the Dragonhide treasure map in their pockets. Who would have thought that they would have to give the map away in the end? The humiliation, the reluctance, was unavoidable. Hand it over. Hen Bieli hollered, the Dragonhide treasure map is no longer a great opportunity for us. If we die here, what does it matter even if we have the treasure map? Won't it still belong to someone else in the end? Hong Zhan lowered his head, his muscular body trembling. It was truly the first time that the leader of the Hall of Crimson Blade had revealed such a weak and sorrowful side in public. Hong Zhan lifted his head to look at Hen Bieli. From the other's eyes, he could see the mountainous and ocean-like hatred. All the plans and arrangements had been successfully completed. The way out was right before their eyes, but at the very last moment, the Crown Prince had popped out and interfered, ruining the perfect plan. If he were to hand over the 2 maps now, perhaps he would never have the chance to see them again in this lifetime. He was shaking all over, his heart a tumultuous storm. Hen Bieli's lips were quivering as well, but his tone was bleak as he urged, "Brother, hand it over." The other 3 pinnacle assassins pressed their lips together like the other 2. They looked at Hen Bieli, Hong Zhan, and then at General Li, who was riding his horse and wielding his saber. The coldness in their eyes was undisguised. The monstrous murderous intent was almost spilling out of them, almost tangible. Hong Zhan caressed his spatial ring, tears of grief falling to the ground. Hardening his heart, he shut his eyes and took out the treasure map. Clutching it in his palm, he stretched his arm out abruptly and said hoarsely, "Take it." He had tried his best to control the 2 words, but they still overflowed with sobs. Everyone present had never heard of such a tone before. No, it was very likely that it was unprecedented and could not be replicated. Who was Hong Zhan? How could he cry in front of everyone? It was a ghastly thing to do. Hen Bieli shut his eyes and exhaled deeply. He strode over and took the 2 dragon hide treasure maps from Hong Zhan, appraising them in front of everyone. First, he slashed them twice with his sword, then burned them with fire for a while to prove that they were the real deal. There was no possibility of them being faked, to avoid any suspicion and the possibility of hidden dangers. Chapter 713. Hen Bieli glanced at Yun Yang after he finished speaking. Yin Yang smiled bitterly and said, "Head landlord Hen, it's not easy to help you. You're putting me on the fire to roast." Hen Bieli answered honestly, "If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to hand this hot potato to young Master Yun either. However, at this moment and place, the only one who can truly maintain fairness and who I can trust is young Master Yun. There's no one else." Yin Yang asked, "Why does head landlord Hen think that I'm completely uninterested in this dragonhide treasure map? Is it just because of my boastful words just now? Don't tell me I won't seize the opportunity to take it for myself?" Hen Bieli chuckled humorlessly. "This is Tiantang City. If young Master Yun really intends to keep this dragonhide treasure map, I believe the news won't even leak out. Since the news has spread so far and wide, causing such a huge dispute, young Master Yun must not be interested in this. How can your words just now be boastful? They must be young Master Yun's heartfelt words. There's no room for falsehood." Hen Bieli's words contained a lot of information. It sounded like praise and criticism at the same time. Even those with better brains would have to think twice before they could fully understand it. Yin Yang could only smile bitterly. If that's the case, should I express my gratitude for head landlord Hen's trust? Hen Bieli smiled bleakly and said faintly, "How can a person at the end of his rope dare accept young Master Yun's thanks?" His gaze froze as he hollered, "Catch, young Master Yun." With a flick of his hand, the dragonhide treasure map that had been the center of attention flew up. Everyone could not help but widen their eyes in unison, focusing on the moment. Many of them were secretly accumulating their strength, intending to leap up and snatch it. What a great opportunity this was. The assassin would forfeit, Yutang officials would not snatch it, and their own side would be watching. Wouldn't it be perfect if they snatched it and left? However, when they saw the chilling arrow light on the tens of thousands of deicide bows, everyone's heart skipped a beat, tacitly dismissing the idea. Yutang officials had said that they would not fight for it, but they were still eyeing it hungrily. The risk of making a move now was too great, so it was better to wait. Therefore, countless pairs of eyes were trained on Yun Yang, who was in the air. They wanted to see how Yun Yang would react next, whether he was truly chivalrous, courageous, righteous, and honorable. Hong Zhan and the other assassins watched as the dragon-hide treasure map flew into the air. Pained expressions appeared on their faces, as if their hearts had been cut by a knife. This was no different from ruthlessly cutting their hearts with a knife. He had given away the rare treasure that he had gotten his hands on, and he could no longer participate in the fight for it. His life was so bleak that it couldn't be any worse. The map slowly rose into the air. Yin Yang stood where he was, not moving at all. The only change was that he had extended his hands slightly. That was all. Seeing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that young Master Yun was really not interested in this. If he wanted it too, he wouldn't be so calm right now. No matter what, they had to descend to welcome them. One should not underestimate this slight movement, but what it represented was significant. No matter how calm or pretentious one was, seeing that the dragonhide treasure map fee was about to fall into their hands, they would not be able to stop themselves from welcoming it. Everyone was certain that even if Ling Xiaozue, De Guchou, Mr. Nian, and the others were here, they would definitely make a move. This was an unprecedented temptation. This was a pie that was bigger than the sky. Getting it meant that they would have the path to heaven. In the face of this dragonhide treasure map, the so-called invincibility of the world was not even worth a mention. It was beneath his notice. What did this mean? However, Yin Yang did not. He even looked annoyed. It was not an act, but a genuine annoyance that came from the bottom of his heart. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the dragonhide treasure map seemed to have flown for a century before it finally landed in Yun Yang's hands. Picking it up with 2 fingers, Yun Yang sighed softly and said, "This is a good thing for those who want it, but to me, it's really just a source of trouble." Without waiting for the crowd to react, he suddenly flipped his wrist and the dragonhide treasure map that he had just obtained flew away with a swoosh. He said faintly, "His Majesty is right. The martial world's matters should be left to the martial world. What belongs to the martial world should belong to the martial world. The martial world's divine item shall not fall into Yutong's hands. Take this treasure map. From now on, don't cause trouble in Tiantang City anymore. The battle for Tiantang City's treasure map ends today. Any more martial artists who cause trouble in Tiantang City by force will not be pardoned." While he was speaking, the dragonhide treasure map had already flown more than a few thousand feet away. Although it was only a split second, it was already filled with countless sword lights and saber auras. Instantly, the whole place was filled with blood, and the blood waves were monstrous. It had only been a split second, but thousands of people had leaped into the air to fight for the treasure. Hundreds of people died instantly. Countless saber light, sword energy, fist energy, and palm skills competed to shine in the air. The stalemate lasted for a moment. Suddenly, someone let out a wild roar and soared into the sky. Then, dozens of rays of light followed closely behind and chased after him. The countless Jianghu cultivators below also soared into the sky without hesitation and chased after him. It had only been a dozen breaths' time, but the land that was covered in blood, severed limbs, and corpses was now empty. Obviously, someone had snatched the dragonhide treasure map and fled at once, while the people behind him gave chase, unwilling to give up. The east side of the city was no longer of any use. It became empty in an instant. The dragonhide treasure map, a huge problem, had been tossed away by Yun Yang. However, in the eyes of many, it was equivalent to giving up a path to heaven. What a reckless waste of a treasure. Despite saying that he had given up, Hen Bieli's eyes were still locked on the dragonhide treasure map. He watched as it left his hands, watched as it landed in Yun Yang's, watched as Yun Yang tossed it away, watched as the crowd fought for it, watched as they fled. After some time, he sucked in a deep breath and raised his head to tell Yun Yang, "Young Master Yun, Hen Bieli has never been convinced by anyone in his entire life, but today, at this very moment, I'm truly convinced." Yun Yang chuckled bitterly and said bluntly, "Head Hen, you're flattering me. Don't you know that I can't keep the treasure map? Even if I borrow Yutong's military might to intimidate and hold on to this map temporarily, what will happen in the future? I'll only bring endless trouble to myself and even the whole of Yutong. I dare not stay. I dare not. Yin Yang said, especially under the circumstances today, I dare not stay. Hen Bieli thought about it and said, young master is wise. It's rare for you to be able to let go. Hong Zhan and the other 3 assassins, who were standing aside, looked like they had lost their parents when they heard him. Hen Bieli raised his head. Young Master Yun, can we go now? He did not ask Yun Xiaoyao or General Li, he only asked Yun Yang. He could already tell that Yun Xiaoyao was not unmoved by the idea of making them stay. Yun Yang was the only one who insisted on letting them go. Yun Yang said, General Li, please order the soldiers to put down their bows and clear a path. Chapter 7:14. General Li's face seemed to be filled with a pained expression. He looked like he was in a dilemma as he said, Young Master Yun, it's not a problem to make way, but His Highness the Crown Prince, Yun Yang said impatiently, this has nothing to do with you. I promise on behalf of Hen Bieli that he won't trouble you after today. As for His Highness the Crown Prince, I'll give him an explanation as well. It still has nothing to do with you. Will that do? He snorted and said, as long as he dares to come looking for me. These words were extremely domineering. General Li still looked pained. He sighed and hesitated for a moment before he finally waved his hand. Put down your bows. Make way. Hen Bieli let out a long howl and said eerily, it's enough to put down your bows. I dare not walk the path that His Highness the Crown Prince has made way for. Before his words echoed in the air, he suddenly soared into the air and hollered, go. Hong Zhan and the rest followed suit. The 5 of them soared into the air like 5 giant birds and made a sharp turn in the air, heading towards the south of the city. The 5 of them converged together. Everywhere they passed, they seemed like bolts of lightning, and they drew out long traces in the sky with shocking might. Who were Hen Bieli and the other 4? Not only were they top assassins, they were also top-notch cultivators. Although Yun Yang had only managed to buy them a moment of buffer time, their injuries were relatively limited. It was only their basic chi that had been depleted. With this gap, their basic chi was replenished. Although they could not recover to their peak combat power, it was not a problem for them to move at high speed. The voices of the 5 men came from afar in unison. Young Master Yun, the mountains are high and the rivers are long. We shall repay this kindness in the future. From today onwards, we shall not lay a finger on young Master Yun or your people. If you have any orders, the martial world will say so. We will die for them. Their voices were getting further and further away, but they were getting louder and louder. Eventually, they were like thunder, ringing in the sky above Tiantang City. At this point, there were no martial world people left in the city's east that had been reduced to ruins. General Li, who had been wearing a pained expression, and his subordinates met Yun Yang's gaze and wore meaningful smiles. The pained expressions were finally gone. Yun Yang's voice asked, is the person who arranged for you here well? This was the last test. This time, their cooperation was flawless, and it was also a test for that person. However, General Li was not someone Yun Yang was familiar with. General Li said, Lord Wu asked us to send his regards on behalf of the young master if he asks. Yun Yang heaved a sigh of relief. He did not interact with Wu Ying for long. During this period of time, they did not meet, merely observing each other. However, Wu Ying's despondent attitude of wanting to do something at the very last moment was obvious. Apart from doing proper business, they were just a bunch of walking corpses. After considering for a long time, Yun Yang finally came to test the waters. Probing wasn't just probing for cooperation. There were other aspects as well. But so far, no other problems have arisen. Military headquarters. General Li came to the door of the deep and serene courtyard. Lord Wu, this subordinate is here to report the completion of the mission. Yes. My lord was right. It was indeed young Master Yun who instructed me to do something. Yes. Greetings to young Master Yun, as per your orders. Yes. Do you have any other orders, my lord? No. This subordinate will take his leave. Yes. The conversation was extremely simple. It was as if Wu Ying only knew how to say one word, not a word more. In spite of this was how he usually behaved in the military headquarters. If it were not for his personal arrangement, he might not even have uttered a word. Inside, Wu Ying sat in front of the table as usual, carefully organizing the military's files and documents over the years. Beside him were a few booklets that had just been compiled. On Han Sanha. On Qiu Jianhan. On the destruction of the 9 supremes. On the dynasty. On the world's great generals. On generals and ministers. On the thesis. On the martial arts. On the imperial court and the martial world. On the difference between generals and marshals. There were also previous manuscripts and new ideas that Wu Ying had worked overtime during this period of time to tidy them up. The contents of these booklets could be said to be the essence of Wu Ying's lifetime of military knowledge and experience. He had dissected almost all the famous officials and ministers from the past to the present, with Wu Ying's personal understanding and comments included. All the classic battle strategies, and tactics were summarized without missing a single one. There was also the rise and fall of all the empires in Tianxian continent for the past 1,000 years, summarizing them all, pointing to the crucial points and writing down the pros and cons. When I die, these can be of some use to Yutang. Consider it the last bit of effort that I can do as the manager of the Board of War. Wu Ying murmured to himself. No, perhaps before I die, I should personally find a few suitable successors. If my efforts are left on the shelf, it'll be meaningless. The end of my journey has been revealed. I don't have much time left. If I continue to sit here, it'll only be a waste of time. There's no benefit to it. Why don't I go to the military camp to select bottom-level officers in a few days' time and train them myself? Only I understand what I've written best after all. I might as well go to the academy and see if I can find a few fated students to pass down what I've learned. I can even find a few successors for old Bai's life's work. Wu Ying, who was lost in his thoughts, was lost for a moment. When he snapped back to reality, he could not help looking at the table with a bitter smile. It was the booklet he had just written, the last volume that he had yet to finish. On how Yutang will unite the world. I probably won't be able to see the unification of the world. No matter what, the governance after the world is united will require more talents. I should indeed take in more disciples during my last moments and train some useful talents for Yutang. According to the current state of the continent and the recent changes, Lord Supreme Cloud has dealt with the imperial court, the martial world, the assassins, the sects, the royalty, and many other troubles. I believe that the war of unification will definitely start within the next 3 to 5 years. Therefore, there won't be much time left for me. I have to find the talents that I need as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'll have to manage the various parties once the war starts. Where will I find the time to train them? If I have someone to assist me in these matters, perhaps the efficiency can be greatly increased. My future thoughts can't be entirely placed on the Board of War. For Yutang's future, I have to change. Wu Ying stood up and relayed his orders. Send a few invitations out for me. A few invitations. It was easy to say, but everyone who saw the names of the people invited to attend the meeting couldn't help but feel a jolt in their hearts. The weight of these invitations was simply immeasurable. It was truly earth-shattering. Fang Qingtian. Qiu Jianhan. Leng Daoyin. Tai Zheng. Old Mistress Shengguan. The 5 people who had been invited to the meeting were almost the empire of Yutang's pillars. Including Wu Ying, they had captured all of Yutang's military forces in one fell swoop, on the surface, in the dark, in fact, and even the spiritual leaders, without missing a single one. Wu Ying gripped the last invitation and finally chuckled bitterly. Do I still have the face to see him? He tossed the invitation into the fire. Cloud. There was only one word on the invitation, but it had already disappeared in the flames. Chapter 7:15. Qiu Jianhan and the others were shocked and they received the invitation. The indescribable shock was something they had only experienced a few times in their lives, but today, they actually felt intimidated. Each of them had received countless invitations in their lives. Even invitations from the royal family, or even from the emperor himself, were nothing to them. However, the invitation from this person today was not only unprecedented, it was something that they could never even dream of receiving in their entire lives. These old men could never imagine that this person would actually send them an invitation. Go at once. Old Marshal Qiu made his decision without hesitation. Fang Qingtian, Leng Daoyin, and the others reacted similarly. In fact, all of them felt as if the world was spinning. That ghost-like fellow actually sent out invitations? Discuss something? Could it be that the sky was going to collapse? If that was not the case, how could there be an invitation from him? This was not an ordinary appointment. The few old men were mumbling inwardly. He didn't come when your father is marrying his daughter-in-law, nor did he come when my grandson is getting married. What is he doing this time? Your father almost died last time and he didn't even make a sound. Why is he sending an invitation this time? Has this bastard gone mad? This was Wu Ying's influence. Shocking the world with a single feat was no longer enough to describe it. On the same night, Wu Ying sat before the table. In front of him were 4 marshals and an old mistress. They were all looking at him like they were looking at a rare animal. Wu Ying's expression was stiff, not saying a word. After a while, all 5 of them looked like they had just eaten **tea. What did he mean by inviting us over without saying a word? Ghost. Sir Wu. Qiu Jianhan almost called out the nickname, Ghost General, that he and the others had given to Wu Ying. He stroked his beard and said, there must be something important that you've invited us over? Wu Ying answered. What did he mean by Old Master Qiu turned his head away, panting heavily. Fang Qingtian asked, what is it? Wu Ying answered, something. He seemed a little distracted. Fang Qingtian fell backward. How could he not know that something was wrong? Tai Jing said, Sir Wu, please speak frankly. He was here to smooth things over. Wu Ying stopped talking at once, frowning as he pondered. These 5 people. Were they worth entrusting? Would there be any problems? If there was a problem, who would it be? Tai Jing almost pulled out his saber. If someone else asked you a question, you would at least respond with an "n," but when I asked you a question, you actually closed your eyes. This was going too far. It's nothing much. I need your help, sirs. Wu Ying snapped out of his daze. The 5 of them snorted and rolled their eyes. Help? With this attitude of yours? Help you my ass. Everyone, take a look at this first. Wu Ying stood up and took out all the books he had written himself. He placed them on the table for everyone to read. Qiu Jianhan and the rest had decided that they would not entertain this fellow, but the names of these booklets before them were alluring enough. There's actually someone analyzing me? There are even people who analyze their opponents? Curious. Why not take a look first? But with one look, it was incredible. He simply couldn't put the booklet down. Wu Ying wanted to speak, but he lifted his head to look. Qiu Jianhan and the rest were looking at each booklet hungrily, like perverts who had seen peerless beauties. After reading one, they picked up another. Each book was like a treasure to them, and they could not bear to put it down. These were the embodiment of true talent, the demonstration of successful experiences. If the dragon-hide treasure map that carried the legacy of the 17th Master of the Abyss was a divine artifact in the eyes of the martial world, then a divine artifact in the eyes of Yutang's military leaders had been born. Yes, these were the booklets that Wu Ying had given out. He was actually willing to share these booklets. It could no longer be described as simply extravagant. No one was unfamiliar with these things, but this was the first time in history that they were truly integrated into a booklet and analyzed using the same system. Especially when the few old generals were involved, they felt even more enlightened when they read it. Fang Qingtian read a few books and sighed deeply, lifting his head to look at Wu Ying. This was truly a genius. An unparalleled genius. Wu Ying's expression was still cold and stiff, but in the eyes of these people, his face was even more beautiful than a peerless beauty. Amazing. Too amazing. Tai Zheng shook his head in admiration as he read. His fingers, which were twice the size of an ordinary person's fingers and resembled the root of a carrot, were flipping through the pages carefully, unable to put them down. There was really no word to praise him, he could only shout out his awesomeness. It did not take long for him to show off for 40 to 50 times. After a while, when everyone had calmed down a little, Wu Ying spoke slowly. Throughout this period of time, I've been reflecting on what I've learned in my life, combining the wisdom and experience of my predecessors to organize and compile these before me. It's estimated that it'll take a long time for all of them to be completed. About half of them aren't done yet. These aren't finalized yet, they still need to be fixed. There are still many parts that can't be understood by the successors if they're simply written in words, so, Wu Ying stuttered a little when he spoke. This was because he rarely interacted with people, but his expression was calm as he said, "So, I'd like to find a few students from the military and the political side. I'll teach them the ways of being an official, the ways of being a person, the ways of war, the ways of socializing, the ways of ruling a country, the ways of unifying, and so on." The few old generals widened their eyes at the same time, their faces agitated. "We agree completely. No objections at all. We'll definitely cooperate fully." As the saying went, a small clue would reveal a big picture. After reading all of this, everyone was even more certain about this ghostly Lord Wu Ying. They had initially thought that this person had the talent to bring peace and stability to the country, but now it seemed that he had the talent to rule the world. He was an all-round talent. He was too amazing. Although these big shots already knew that they might not be able to match up to this ghost general in some aspects before reading these booklets, they were still seniors after all. Moreover, due to his habitual low profile, even if they wanted to promote and cultivate him, it would be difficult for them to do so. However, now that they had experienced Wu Ying's abilities firsthand, the few big shots immediately made up their minds. No matter whether Wu Ying wanted to show his face or not, he had to do so. It was a crime for such a great talent to be buried until now. When they heard that Wu Ying had volunteered to teach students, the few big shots were overjoyed. They were wild with joy. As for whether Wu Ying was boasting, or if he was being too arrogant, saying that he would teach them everything he knew, the big shots did not question him at all. The contents of the books that Wu Ying had given them were already of sufficient weight. There was no way they would question him further. The only thing they needed to do was to support him, to give him their full support. Wu Ying lifted his eyelids and said, "Regarding my students, I have some strict requirements. I'll only teach them if they meet those requirements. Firstly, their family background must be clean. Secondly, their character must be passable. Thirdly, there were more than a dozen requirements in total." However, Qiu Jianhan and the others had agreed without hesitation. There was not a single word of objection, not even the slightest hesitation. It was Fang Qingtian who interrupted hesitantly, "Can the children of our families participate in the selection?" Wu Ying answered, "Even the children of gangsters can participate." Fang Qingtian could not help coughing, feeling an urge to fight. "Isn't the way you agreed a little too offensive?" Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin burst out laughing. Old Mistress Shangguan was enthusiastic as well. "Our Shangguan," Wu Ying cut her off, "the teachers of your children are better than me." The corners of old Mistress Shangguan's lips twitched. "Well, I really can't tell." Wu Ying then added, "I dare not snatch his disciple." Old Mistress Shangguan was stunned. Qiu Jianhan was taken aback as well. Among these people, Qiu Jianhan knew about them, but Wu Ying's words carried a deeper meaning. Yesterday's WeChat winner was commoner. This name made me dazed for a moment. Actually, none of us were ordinary people. Who can transcend? Eating, drinking, defecating day after day, big and small. Sigh. Chapter 7:16. However, with Wu Ying's ability and talent, it would not be a problem for him to groom half of the Empire of Yutong if he were to start a class and take in disciples. The pamphlets that were in front of him were more than enough to prove it. How many people do you need, specifically? Leng Daoyin asked. Wu Ying calculated in his mind and said, there can be 20 people for me to choose from, but no more than 10 can stay. In the end, however, I can only choose one person each for my legacy, one for civil and one for martial. That's a little too few, Tai Jing said. Wu Ying rolled his eyes. Humph, everyone understood what he meant. This was teaching from the very beginning. Who knew how much effort it would take? 10 people was already a little too many, how could it be considered too few? However, Wu Ying continued, other than the 2 I've chosen in the end, even the other 8 who have been eliminated from my side shouldn't be a problem for them to guard one side, conservatively speaking. The quintet's eyes shone. What are the specific requirements? Old Mistress Shangguan was more meticulous in her thinking. The 2 I value the most need to have a family background. Wu Ying said, otherwise, it'll take too long for them to climb up from the bottom. No one had any objections to this. It was a reasonable request to have a high starting point. As for the other 8, I have no other requirements other than their character. Wu Ying said. That makes things easier. Qiu Jianhan was the first to voice his opinion. The few of us will help you be the head examiners. You don't have to worry about fairness. The others nodded in agreement. Then, I'll have to trouble all of you to help me. Wu Ying bowed faintly and said, I know that all of you elders are busy with official duties and even more personal matters. I dare not stay for long. Please leave now. Once he said that, the quintet looked at each other, not knowing how to react. F***CK, you invited us here one by one just to give us a mission? You've sent us an invitation, brother. Forget about wine and meat, we can't even get a glass of water when we come here and you're chasing us away. How could there be such a thing in this world? Even if you have talent, great talent, and are amazing. Yes, you are amazing. Fang Qingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Wu Ying, aren't you going to take care of a meal? Wu Ying lifted his head to look at the old Grand Commandant coldly and said flatly, your humble servant has always been poor. Now, I don't even have a penny on me. All these years, we've been living off the government and wearing the government's clothes. We've taken too many advantages. How can we be greedy? The implication was, you want me to treat you to a meal? That's forcing me to be greedy, forcing me to fall. What do you mean? The 5 of them were once again dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. I'm convinced. Qiu Jianhan said angrily, this rascal, he really lives up to his name of Wu. The moment he said that, everyone was instantly reminded of the iron face, just good Samaritan. They could not help glancing suspiciously at Wu Ying's face, thinking to themselves, F***CK, don't tell me these 2 are twins? They were the 2 oddities of Yutong's officialdom. You and Wu Lai. Leng Daoyin finally asked, are brothers? Wu Ying watched Leng Daoyin's face quietly for a while before he suddenly asked, are all those with the surname Leng in this world your brothers? Leng Daoyin was exasperated. All of them are my brothers? What kind of nonsense was that? Leng was not a big star, but there were millions of people in this world. Who could give birth to so many people? This bastard could really choke people to death with his words. Ha ha ha. Qiu Jianhan was overjoyed. Wu Ying kept a straight face, his expression unfriendly. You may leave. I have something to attend to. The 5 of them were instantly enraged. Even His Majesty could not speak to the 5 of them like this. It was the first time in their lives that they were asked to leave like this. The 5 of them stood up angrily and left, cursing and swearing. Fang Qingtian walked to the door and suddenly turned to ask, "That's not right. Your food and clothing are provided by the country. Where is your salary for so many years?" Old Grand Commandant Fang's question came out of the blue, but there was a deeper meaning behind it. Yutang rewarded its soldiers handsomely with rations and salaries. Wu Ying's position was extremely high and he was not burdened by his family. His family should be rich, so why did he not have a single penny? Wu Ying replied, "It's always been kept in the Board of War's account. This lowly official has never used money, so there's no need to withdraw it. I even have to spend it, it's troublesome." Old Grand Commandant Fang's mouth was agape, looking at this ghost-like fellow like he was looking at a deity. After a long, long time, he closed his mouth with a click and left without a word. There was only one word in his mind: amazing. There was actually someone in this world who did not take a salary just because he was afraid that it would be too troublesome to spend money. The 5 bosses, who refused to believe it, went to the financial department of the military supplies department and retrieved Wu Ying's salary records. They found out that Wu Ying's salary was indeed not a small sum. He had already accumulated more than 100,000 taels of silver. However, there was no record of him claiming it at all. He was truly a rich man. Qiu Jianhan shook his head and sighed. "I thought he was a god who could rule the world, but he's actually a ghost who has gone into seclusion. He probably won't be able to spend our human money in this lifetime. This old man should quickly go work for him. I'll go as well. It's more important to go work quickly." The group turned and walked away, filled with admiration. "Cough, I say. I guess Sir Wu won't want the money he's saved in the future." Tai Zhang's eyes glowed. "Why don't you give it all to me?" "Take it." Old Grand Commandant decided right away. Of course, Tai Zhang was not going to spend it for himself. Wu Ying would not use the money anyway, so he might as well let Tai Zhang take it. The families of the martyrs could at least have a few more mouthfuls of food to eat. It was better than leaving them here to collect dust. If it were not for today's meeting, even if Tai Zhang and the other bosses knew that Wu Ying had such a sum of silver taels under his name and knew that he would not use it, they would not have done so either. Now, however, the situation was completely different. Wu Ying was even willing to give away such a precious book that contained his lifetime's worth of knowledge. What was a little bit of silver worth? How could a genius with such a noble character, unquestionable integrity, and magnanimity care about money? Therefore, he directly took it away and used it on someone who needed it more. It was the best. Tai Zhang's embezzlement of the money was justified. Yin Yang soon found out about Wu Ying's actions. Facing Shui Wu Ying's questioning gaze, Yin Yang was silent for a long time. "Boss, how should we handle this?" "Let him be." Yin Yang sighed. Shui Wu Ying was rather reluctant. "But, he's one of the culprits. We can't just let him be, can we?" Although Shui Wu Ying did not say it out loud, he was more or less indignant that Yin Yang had spared Wu Ying the last time. The only difference between his mentality and Yin Yang's was that Yin Yang would sometimes choose to prioritize the bigger picture under certain conditions. Shui Wu Ying, on the other hand, was much more straightforward. If one had done a bad thing, one would be a bad person for life. One should be killed. It had to be said that such thinking was rather extreme. "Let him be." Yin Yang said, "You have to assist him in finding his disciples. You must investigate the background of these disciples and ensure that they are pure." Shui Wu Ying heaved a deep sigh. He did not speak for a long time. Yin Yang frowned. "Is there a problem?" "I only have one request." Shui Wu Ying said boldly, "When Wu Ying dies in the future, no matter how he dies, I want to see his corpse." Chapter 717. The wind blew and the clouds surged, rising swiftly but dissipating just as swiftly. An unprecedented martial world catastrophe had begun in Tiantang City and ended in Tiantang City. Although many people had died during this period of time and the entire east district of Tiantang City had been reduced to ruins, there was almost no loss to Tiantang City itself. What was called a scene of devastation and ruins could only be rebuilt. It was not necessarily a bad thing for the buildings to be razed to the ground. There could not be construction without destruction. The destruction had been completed and the rebuilding process was just around the corner. The East District that had been renovated would definitely be cleaner and more uniform than any other district. It was entirely predictable. This was, in fact, a good thing for Yutong. As for the number of casualties, 99% of them were martial artists. Whether it was martial artists or assassins, none of them had much to do with Yutong. On the other hand, the number of martial artists who had received Yutong's grace and returned their remains after this battle was no less than 100,000. At the very least, it was a great gain in terms of reputation. Most importantly, the assassin organizations that had been worrying Yutong were completely wiped out after this battle. Out of the hundreds of thousands of famous assassins who made a living out of killing, only 5 managed to escape in the end. Furthermore, these 5 people were released after receiving a favor from the Demon King. Therefore, to Yutong, there was really no longer a need to worry about assassinations, not almost. From now on, for a very, very long time, it would be difficult to find a market for hiring assassins in the entire continent. Furthermore, this situation was a great thing for the officials and magnates of the entire continent. After all, the wealthier and more influential a person was, the more they were afraid of death. Illness and assassination had always been things that wealthy people feared. Now that half of them would not be able to haunt them for a very long time, how could they not be elated? Therefore, after this incident, Yutong's reputation, whether it was in the imperial court or outside, had risen to a relatively high level. The only one who was unhappy and unlucky was probably Yutong's crown prince. What? I sent someone to snatch the Dragonhide treasure map. And killed countless top-notch assassins in 3 rounds? The crown prince was dumbfounded when he heard the report. His handsome face turned pale. When did I give such an order? How is that possible? The crown prince's 6 armies? The crown prince was dumbfounded. It's true that they belong to the crown prince's residence, but that's only in name, okay? Since when did I, the crown prince, command those people? These troops are all under my father's control. How could they possibly listen to my orders? If I could mobilize them, wouldn't I have? These were heartfelt words. Although the crown prince's 6th command consisted of only about 10,000 men, they were the most elite combat force in Yutong's army. Be it their cultivation base or their weapons and equipment, they were the cream of the crop. However, it was only a title. Even the crown prince himself had never thought of attacking this army. He didn't dare to. Because none of them really listened to the crown prince. Otherwise, even if it was a sneak attack, even if it was an opportunity to strike, even if the target was exhausted, how could it be possible to annihilate so many top-notch assassins with 3 volleys of arrows? If these people really listened to His Highness the Crown Prince's orders, His Highness the Crown Prince would probably wake up laughing in his dreams. He really wanted it to be a reality. But, someone, invite General Li here. I have something to ask him. His Highness's face slowly turned menacing. Your Highness, General Li said, he's busy with military affairs. Your Highness's arrangements have been completed. It's a waste of time to travel back and forth. Your Highness, please don't be so courteous. There's plenty of time for rewards and whatnot. The Crown Prince was furious. The arrangements I've made have been completed. There's no need to be courteous. There's even a reward. Bastard. His Highness sprung up and roared, this is framing. This is fabricating something out of nothing. This is slandering the prince, this is a huge scapegoat on my head. How can there be a future for me? His Highness was about to go mad. How could he admit to such a thing? Even if he really wanted to do so, he would never have said it so clearly. You've done it, there's plenty of time for you to do it. Not to mention that I didn't give you any orders. Even if it was really my intention, how can you explain yourself by letting 5 of the scariest assassins escape? I'm the one who invited them here. Now, it's me who wants to kill them, and I've already killed tens of thousands of their brothers. Such an irreconcilable feud has been planted on me. Even jumping into the lunar river won't be able to wash it clean. From now on, almost everyone in this world won't have to worry about assassins anymore, but I, the Crown Prince, will have to live in fear day and night. There's still me to be afraid of. Hen Bieli, Hong Zhan, or even the 5 peerless assassins working together to assassinate him at any time, anywhere, and at any moment. His Highness's face was contorted as he roared and cursed in a frenzy. Now, His Highness had basically become a general without an army. Other than a few rotten scholars, the rest did not have the slightest bit of strength left. His strategists were killed one by one, his teachers were killed, his guards, those who could be considered experts, were all wiped out. The Crown Prince thought about it carefully and was shocked to find that the only person he could discuss something with was the Crown Princess. Unknowingly, the talents around him, the heir to the Eastern Palace, had withered. There was no one he could use. Your Highness, this is obviously a trap set by His Majesty, King Xiaoyao, and the military. The Crown Princess looked worried. Other than being unsure if His Majesty is unaware of it or has acquiesced, the military and King Xiaoyao are definitely involved. The Crown Prince asked blankly, "Why is that?" The Crown Princess answered, "How can Your Highness not see the current situation? What they're doing is nothing more than clearing a path for someone. Your Highness is the rightful heir to the throne of Yutong. How can you not be their biggest obstacle?" The Crown Prince said, "That's right. This must have been planned by Yunyang, Tai Zheng, and the others. They want to force me into a dead end. What a wild ambition." The Crown Princess lowered her head and said, "Now that the situation is dire, it's useless to pursue the matter. Your Highness, the situation is clear now. It's over and your position as the heir to the Eastern Palace is fated to be lost. If you continue to force it, I'm afraid you'll have to pay with your life as well. Your Highness, please plan for a retreat as soon as possible. It's more important to preserve your life." The Crown Princess looked defeated as well, but she could see things clearer than the Crown Prince. She knew that her man had no chance of Yutong's throne anymore. If he persisted, it would only be the end of the game. There was no chance at all. Recalling the time when she had just become the Crown Princess, she had dreamed of being the mother of the world and standing side by side with the Crown Prince more than once. Now, no, it had been a long time since she had given up on this extravagant hope. The Crown Prince heaved a long sigh. The problem is, even if I'm willing to defile myself and abandon my position as the Crown Prince, it's hard to keep my life. They've let go of the 5 pinnacle assassins in this world this time, and the biggest enemy of these 5 assassins is me. This battle has cut off my future and my life. The Crown Prince seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. I have nowhere else to go. Chapter 718. The Crown Prince was distraught and filled with fear. It was too terrifying. Who knew when he would be decapitated with a single slash and lose his life? Such a possibility had been thoroughly imprinted in the Crown Prince's mind, giving him the urge to cry out loud just thinking about it. Indeed, facing the ambush of 5 top-notch assassins at any time, it was difficult to be safe even if he hired Ling Xiaozui and Gudu Chou as his bodyguards. No matter how good the bodyguards were, they could only protect him for a while, but could they protect him forever? Yet, the enmity between the Crown Prince and Hen Bieli and the rest was irreconcilable. The 100,000 assassins were all dead, killed by the martial artists. However, His Highness the Crown Prince's final move was enough for the 5 top assassins to pin all their hatred on the Crown Prince. Furthermore, it was deeply rooted. The Crown Princess sighed, looking at the Crown Prince pitifully. He had long known that it was impossible, yet he still held on to his wild thoughts and refused to give in, struggling blindly on the brink of death. Now, all his escape routes had been completely cut off. All his escape routes had been cut off as well. What else could he do? Now that things had come to this, who could he blame? However, it's not like there's no way out of this situation. The Crown Princess sighed. At this moment, there's still one person who can turn the situation around and save our lives. His Highness perked up upon hearing that. Who? Is it Father? It's a pity that even Father can't do anything to Hen Bieli and the rest. The Crown Princess said slowly, I'm not talking about Father, but Yun Yang, young Master Yun. The Crown Princess's words were earth-shattering. His Highness was stunned and speechless for a moment. His Highness the Crown Prince has come to visit? Yun Yang looked at Lao Mei, the corners of his eyes and brows filled with surprise. Yes. Invite him in. A meaningful smile hung on the corners of Yun Yang's lips. The arrival of the visitor was unexpected, but how could it not be reasonable when one thought about it? Yun Xiaoyao looked at Yun Yang, his lips moving before he finally sighed and said, You handle it. I have to excuse myself. What if His Highness the Crown Prince hugged his thigh and begged for mercy? What should he do? No matter what, he was still the Crown Prince's uncle, his blood relative. Although there is a saying that people need face and trees need bark, isn't it true that a person's conscience is also a sense of shame? Why can't they do it? Yin Yang smiled faintly. Very well, you may go ahead. He said leisurely, I have a lot of experience in dealing with this guy. You only want to live? Yin Yang looked at His Highness the Crown Prince in front of him. His Highness the Crown Prince of Yutong was like a rooster that had completely lost its fight, completely devoid of spirit. Yes. The Crown Prince's eyes were lifeless, and he was emaciated. Only 2 nights had passed, but the Crown Prince, who was originally as handsome as jade, suddenly seemed to have aged 30 to 50 years. Even the hair on his temples had turned white. The goal that he had fought for half of his life, he had thought that it was close at hand and within his reach, but in a single night, it disappeared without a trace. His Highness the Crown Prince had never been one with a strong will to begin with. Naturally, he could not bear such a heavy blow. If it were not for Yun Yang's life-saving straw, he would have either committed suicide in a few more days or he would have gone mad from depression to insanity. Live. Yun Yang mused. The Crown Prince said, I've written the memorial, requesting to be demoted to the position of Crown Prince. I've even found excuses for myself, no talent, no virtue, no character, no looks, no morals, no morals, no morals, no morals, no morals, rebelling against the superiors, bullying men and women, a man's unmentionable illness. His Highness the Crown Prince was really going all out, even using the excuse of a man's unmentionable illness. His sincerity was overwhelming. However, he had to do it. The Emperor had already agreed that the martial world's conflict would take place in the east of the city, but he had ordered to intervene. Although the truth was that he had been framed, the Crown Prince knew that he could not escape from it. With so many people working together, the Board of Military and the government had already joined hands. Even if it was black, it had to be white. There was no need for any evidence, nor was there any hope of turning the tables. The Crown Prince's expression was blank. I only hope that young Master Yun can save my life. Everything else is inconsequential. Yin Yang said faintly, I've seen your Highness' sincerity, but there's one more charge that you haven't mentioned. This alone is insufficient sincerity. His Highness the Crown Prince lifted his head abruptly. What charge? What charge? I'll just admit to it. Why didn't you mention a word about the murder of the 9 Supremes? Even if you've listed 1,000 charges, how can you talk about sincerity if you don't mention this? Yin Yang's gaze was like lightning, his words sharp as a sword. His Highness the Crown Prince felt as if he had been struck by lightning upon hearing his words. He felt dizzy and his mouth was agape, unable to speak for a moment. He looked at Yun Yang in horror, his face pale. Yin Yang's cold gaze met the Crown Prince's and said, Don't misunderstand me. I'm trying to trick you. The murder of the 9 Supremes has been investigated by many parties and there's a conclusion to it. However, you're connected to every single party. Although you've been used by the various forces throughout the entire process, ultimately becoming a passive puppet who has been deceived by the Four Seasons Tower, who thinks highly of himself, who thinks that he's in control of the entire situation. You think that you're the one in charge of the battle at Tianxian Mountain, but in fact, every step of your plan has been pushed by others, intentionally or unintentionally. However, you've still done this. Your malice towards the Nine Supremes is real, it's not fake at all. The Crown Prince's face was as white as a sheet, his gaze filled with panic. I only have one question for you. Why did you plot against the Nine Supremes? What's the reason? Yin Yang asked in a low voice. You are the heir to the throne. No matter how powerful the Nine Supremes are, no matter how reputable they are, the empire they conquer will ultimately belong to you. It can be said that they are conquering the empire for you. Yin Yang asked in confusion, why do you want to destroy your own empire? Give me a reason. This was what Yin Yang was most confused about. The Four Seasons Tower's motive for plotting against the Nine Supremes was obvious. However, the Crown Prince's plotting against the Nine Supremes had almost dragged his own country into a swamp and was on the brink of annihilation. This was inexplicable and confusing. The Crown Prince hung his head low. After a long time, he said hoarsely, I saw Big Brother during the New Year that year. Yin Yang frowned. The Crown Prince covered his entire face. Back then, Father had already spread the news a few years ago that Big Brother had died of a sudden illness, but I saw Big Brother, alive and well, outside Father's royal study. I was stunned then, stunned for a long time. That night, Imperial Father was dead drunk. He looked at me, his eyes filled with reluctance and unwillingness. He only said one sentence before he was completely drunk and unconscious. Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath. What did His Majesty say? Chapter 719. Yin Yang's expression changed when he heard the explanation. This was the so-called reason. The Emperor had actually let it slip. Furthermore, it had been leaked to someone who should never have known, His Highness the Crown Prince, the party involved. At that time, there was no one else around, and the nearest person was several feet away. Father's words were very vague. No one heard it except for me. But at that time, I was stunned again, just like the moment when I accidentally saw Big Brother. No, I was just panicking and at a loss. Hearing Father's words, I felt like I was struck by lightning, unable to calm down. Yin Yang sighed. You don't have to go on. He finally understood. Everything was clear now. The Emperor had always had such a plan in his heart. Then it was no wonder. Honestly, this plan was easy to execute. As long as the world was unified and the world was completed, this world would belong to Yutong's territory. Then, the eldest prince's identity as one of the Nine Supremes would no longer be a secret. The fact that the eldest prince was the leader of the Nine Supremes, Supreme Earth, would be a bright light in Yutong's conquest of the world. At that time, all he had to do was to issue an imperial edict at the right time, stating the reason why the news of the first prince's sudden death was spread all those years ago. After making such a huge sacrifice, it was completely logical for the first prince to return and ascend to the throne today. None of Yutong's subjects and people would object to it. There was only one person who was an exception, His Highness the Crown Prince, the heir to the East Palace on the surface. It was then that His Highness the Crown Prince knew about His Majesty's plan. His title as the Crown Prince was only a decoration on the surface. Yin Yang heaved a long sigh. Looking down at the old and desolate Crown Prince, he was speechless and conflicted. Should he kill or not kill the Crown Prince? To kill or not to kill, it all depended on Yin Yang's decision. Logically speaking, the Crown Prince deserved to die for what he had done. However, if one were to consider his position, his choice would be detrimental to the country and disloyal to the Emperor, but it was understandable for him. It was only right for the heir of the royal family to do whatever it took to ascend to the throne. It was only right that the winner took all. Come to think of it, it was the Crown Prince's downfall today, but if he had perished at Tianxian Cliff that day and had not saved the poisoned Emperor of Yutong, the position of the next Emperor of Yutong might have long fallen to the Crown Prince. By then, whether Yutong would be annexed or destroyed by other countries, His Highness the Crown Prince would have won the War of Succession. For a moment, Yun Yang's thoughts were a jumbled mess. It was difficult for him to make a decision. In a trance, he felt as if two pairs of eyes were watching him from afar. Old Ninth, my brother, is still my brother. Supreme Earth's words. Supreme Earth did not say it out loud. However, since he was willing to make such a sacrifice for his country and family, he probably wouldn't want to see his younger brother die in his own hands, right? But, what about the other brothers? There's still a way out if you want to live. A cold glint flashed across Yun Yang's eyes. His gaze was misty because the 8 masked silhouettes seemed to have slipped past his eyes just a moment ago. His decision was made in that instant. He enunciated each word clearly, no matter what, you have to die once first before we can talk about the future. Having been the Crown Prince for so long, the Crown Prince naturally understood the deeper meaning behind Yun Yang's words. Without hesitation, he nodded and said, I will follow young Master Yun's arrangements. Faking one's death and hiding one's identity to deal with the current situation was the best solution. However, with the Crown Prince's current capability, it would be difficult to complete it, not to mention the countless hidden dangers. However, if this plan were to be arranged by Yun Yang, it would be a completely different matter. The success rate would increase tremendously. At the end of this situation, perhaps His Highness the Crown Prince of Yutong would perish from this world, but he could continue to live. At this moment, the Crown Prince felt that he had understood everything and could feel Yun Yang's kindness and sincerity. Yun Yang nodded and said nothing more. Watching the Crown Prince walk out of the residence of Yun with his back hunched, Yun Yang could clearly feel that this matter had finally come to an end. This Crown Prince, who had been a decoration in the Empire of Yutong for years, the heir to the Eastern Palace, was truly disheartened and had no more lingering feelings. However, could it be that I've schemed and schemed so many times just for you to be disheartened? Yun Yang stood with his arms behind his back. Smoke flashed across his eyes, eventually turning into a tinge of viciousness. It was an indescribable menace. Yun Xiaoyao walked out from behind the screen and let out a long sigh. King Yun could not help but let out the desire to sigh in his heart. Yun Yang, what are you doing? What is your ultimate goal after going through so much trouble? King Xiaoyao looked melancholy and puzzled. The situation had basically come to an end. Yun Yang had gained a lot from this battle. He had killed Ouyang Xiaoxi, whom he had to kill, and wiped out 99% of the world's top-notch assassins. He had even taken the opportunity to knock down the Crown Prince of Yutong, but the price he had to pay was equally great. Just the Dragonhide treasure map alone had made Yun Xiaoyao wringing his hands and sighing endlessly. Especially now that Yun Yang had shifted the attention of the 5 top-notch assassins to the Crown Prince, it was a beautiful move, but it inevitably made some people unhappy. The some people here were probably referring to the Emperor of Yutong and Yun Xiaoyao himself. What is it? Yun Yang asked with a smile. Haven't you gone too far? The bloodline of the royal family. Yun Xiaoyao sighed. After this battle, the Crown Prince has been completely wiped out by you. The 3rd prince has also been crippled by you, and he's even been driven mad by fear. The 4th prince, although we're at peace for now, I don't think you'll let him go. There's also the 5th and 6th princes. These 2 fellows have been recruiting too smoothly during this period of time. Although I don't know the exact situation, I can still be sure that all of this is your doing. I even suspect how many of their so-called subordinates actually listen to them. Can there be even half of them? I'm not surprised that you've targeted the Crown Prince, the 3rd prince, and even the 4th prince, but the 5th prince is only 13 this year, and the 6th prince is only 12. Yun Xiaoyao said, aren't you being a little too ruthless when you've already started planning to target them? I didn't hide any of this from you, Yun Yang said faintly. Yun Xiaoyao sighed. Yes, if you didn't want me to know, I probably wouldn't even be able to get these tiny clues. So I think you've probably made corresponding arrangements for the other princes, haven't you? It's better to prepare for a rainy day than to nip it in the bud. Yin Yang was still nonchalant about it. Everything you've done is to pave the way for Bao, to avoid all possible accidents? Yin Xiaoyao asked. It's true that I've paved the way for him, but it's another matter to avoid all possible accidents, Yin Yang said honestly. After all, there are still some things that I don't want to do. If I were to do all of them, it would be truly paving the way for him. Oh? Yin Xiaoyao asked. Yin Yang waved his arms and said, actually, the source of these princes' ambitions all comes from the harem. Yin Xiaoyao shuddered when he heard him and exclaimed, what do you want to do? Don't you dare mess around. My royal brother won't let you do as you please. Chapter 720. Yin Xiaoyao closed his eyes and sucked in a deep breath. It was true that not everyone could stop Yin Yang now. At least, no one in the empire of Yutong could, whether it was Yin Xiaoyao or Yutong's emperor, Yu Peiza. As long as he wanted to do something, Yin Yang would accomplish it even if the entire empire of Yutong banded together to stop him. It had already come to this. I've done what I can. Yin Yang said, everything else will be left to bear fruit in the future. Yin Xiaoyao said, have you ever thought that Bauer doesn't live up to your expectations and can't live up to your expectations? No matter how you teach him, he won't grow up to be what we want him to be. What then? Yin Yang said, nothing. Let him squander as he pleases, as long as the empire that the 9 supremes have painstakingly built isn't lost to an outsider. He grinned. That's enough. He laughed. Didn't the elders build the empire and earn the fortune to pass it on to their descendants? If the descendants can live up to expectations, they can defend it and develop it. If they can't, shouldn't they be defeated by him as well? Yin Yang laughed heartily. How can the empire that his father and uncle fought for be given to others? When the one who built the empire wants to retreat, who else should the ready-made empire be given to if not him? If not him, who else should be defeated? Besides, like you said, it's still uncertain what he'll look like. Who knows, he might be a saint throughout the ages, a strong grandfather who surpasses his ancestors. Who can say for sure? Yin Xiaoyao could only sigh after he said that, not saying anything else. After I die, it doesn't matter how my property and my son are ruined, it doesn't matter. This was probably what Yin Yang was thinking at the moment. Be it carefree or selfish, it was sincere and directed at his heart. Yin Xiaoyao had gone into closed-door cultivation. He needed some time to digest Yin Yang's words. In addition, he was extremely conflicted. Yin Yang had nothing to hide at this point, but a difficult problem had been left for Yin Xiaoyao. Should he tell His Majesty the Emperor? Why was this multiple-choice question placed before him all the time, forcing him to choose? Each time, he had chosen this side. Yin Xiaoyao sighed in his study. Have the 10 Yama kings and Feng Mafei returned yet? Yin Yang asked Lao Mei. No, there's no news yet, but it's still within the permitted time, Lao Mei replied. Yes. Yin Yang did not speak anymore. He closed his eyes, deep in thought. The next morning, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince submitted a memorial, admitting that he had no talent and no virtue, and requested to be removed from the position of Crown Prince. Looking at the Crown Prince's letter, the Emperor was stunned for a long time. The expression on his face was complicated. There was relief, understanding, pain, and reluctance. But in the end, he waved his brush and approved the request. Then, he conferred the former Crown Prince the title of King Anil and granted him Dragon City. Dragon Sealing City was located in the south of Yutong, 27,000 miles away from the capital, Tiantang City. It would take at least a year for an ordinary person to go back and forth between the two places. His Majesty considered it for a long time before issuing another order, depart for the fiefdom within a month. After that, he was not allowed to return without the imperial edict. From receiving the request, approving the request, conferring the title of king, and assigning the fiefdom, there were few obstructions throughout the entire process. His Majesty did not even ask for the opinions of the officials. It was as if he was just going through the motions, asking a few questions and deciding everything. It was a completely arbitrary decision. Many of the officials in the imperial court were puzzled, but those who were truly in high positions took it as a matter of course and had no doubts at all. They did not get involved throughout the entire process and did not speak a word. They did not even say a word to mediate the situation. This was a first in the history of Tianxian continent. It was unknown if there would be no one to repeat it, but it was definitely unprecedented. When Yunyang heard the news, there was no change in his expression. He could only smile faintly. His Majesty has really put in a lot of effort. He's trying to protect his son's life. Shangguan Lingxiu, who was beside him, said, His Majesty is a parent as well. This is only reasonable. It's not surprising. Yunyang smiled and said, but not everyone can protect the second prince's life. His Majesty's painstaking effort will inevitably be in vain. Forget it, let's go see Bao, and the rest. It's been a while since I've trained with them. Do I need to explain that the second prince is the dethroned crown prince? In the backyard of the residence of Yun. Bao, was still young, still a child, but he had grown a head taller in this 1 year. He already looked like a young teenager. At this moment, a little person dressed in a white brocade robe was holding a book in his hand, his eyes glued to it without blinking. Beside the little person was a teacher who was explaining in detail to him. Behind Bao, there were a few other children who were reading as well. However, their frowns were a clear indication of their dislike of books. Prosperity, the people suffer; death, the people suffer. Bao, recited and said, Since prosperity and death are all suffering, how can one not suffer? Beside him, the scholar smiled and said, Prosperity and death are all suffering, they have different meanings. Death, of course, doesn't need to be considered. It's the fall of a nation, of course, suffering. Prosperity, however, doesn't mean prosperity, it means rising. Since there are people who rise, there are people who fall. Similarly, the rise of a nation will be accompanied by the fall of another nation. This process is all suffering. Therefore, prosperity and death are all suffering. However, if a nation can be at peace for a long time, the people won't have to suffer. The hearts of the people are the most simple. As long as they have food to eat, they won't complain about suffering. Then, how can a nation be at peace for a long time? Bao, frowned, his young face filled with doubt and pity. How can everyone have a good meal? A clear voice rang with a smile, Peace and stability for a long time is a huge problem. It requires at least the efforts of a few generations. It was Yun Yang's voice. Uncle Yun. Bao, called out happily and was about to charge towards the voice. For some reason, he held himself back and looked at the two teachers in front of him, obviously waiting for their signal. Go on. The teachers chuckled. Only then did Bao, rush over and reach Yun Yang's side in a flash, hugging his arm. Yun Yang squatted down and picked up Bao's tiny frame, continuing to explain with a chuckle, only with the tireless efforts of a few generations can the nation prosper and the people be at peace. Every citizen can have a good meal. The first emperor who founded the nation and established the dynasty had many things to do. The second-generation emperor mostly focused on recuperation. The third-generation emperor guarded the foundation and hid the wealth from the people. Only when it came to the fourth-generation emperor's rule can the nation be at peace and the people be well fed and clothed. However, if this can go on for a long time, the world will truly not be suffering. Yun Yang looked into Bao's eyes and said, Bao, how to make the world not suffer is truly a great knowledge. You have to learn well and put it into action. Only then will the people and the world be blessed. Bao, asked, then how should I do it? How do I start? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.